Nice.
All righty then.
Here we are.
Yes.
So I suppose that we want to like set some context for the people listening.
Yes.
And I think probably the people who are listening, like most of them will know either Sam Harris or Jordan Peterson. But for those also who are unfortunate enough to not have known them, would you give a shot at giving some context about you,
Mm-hmm.
about Sam Harris, and about Jordan Peterson, and then I can weave in there with you, and we can kind of set the context,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can just launch.
Yeah, sure. So there's ethics, which is what is the good, and meta ethics, which is how do you determine what is the good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm particularly interested in meta ethics and how you can use ethics to actually live a better life, thriving. I call my work the game of thriving. It's all about thriving and approaching it in a way that you kick its ass the most and have the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
So Sam Harris is a neuroscientist, someone who's studying the brain and who's written a book called The End of Faith, which is about asking the question, why don't we critique religion the same way we critique people who believe that Elvis are alive? Why do we give religion a special thing? So you could say that's the thing that he made his splash with. But then he wrote a book called The Moral Landscape, and he wrote a couple other books. But The Moral Landscape says that you can determine values through science, right? And that is metaethics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I created a video series called Optimal Human Values, which essentially took the premise, the pieces that Sam Harris laid down as an opportunity to start to lay out my metaethics. And so Sam Harris is a hero to me, an intellectual hero, and I appreciate him greatly over the years. And a couple years ago, so that's Sam Harris. Jordan Peterson is, I think the simplest way of putting it is that he is a Jungian psychologist who studies unconscious mythological thinking and who studies the history of totalitarian regimes.
Right.
And uses the mythological understanding to figure out what the hell went wrong. How is it that we had these regimes which claimed moral purity, which claimed that they were on the good side of history, but killed hundreds of millions of people?
Yes. Yes.
And how did they stay in existence? How do people justify that? How do they use the stories and how to do this? So when these two got together for their podcast and they had their conversation, I, like many people who love both of them, who find them incredibly intellectually intriguing and enlivening and precise and fecund, just really rich, was really excited, but they got stuck on the definition of truth for 2 hours.
Right.
And at the end of it, Sam said, let's crowdsource the postmortem. What went wrong?
Yeah.
And you and I were talking about that. And we thought we should do a video on it. So that's the context that I'm coming into the video with.
Totally. Got you. So a little bit of my context. So I'm, I guess, I started something called circling, or I discovered something called circling, and now circling is all over the world. And we can talk about more of that later, but it's, essentially like a relational practice. And that is essentially, to me, it is about truth, right? It's about like looking at another and actually seeing them as another, like in the I thou sense of the word. And I really don't have any kind of scholastic background other than I graduated art school, the San Francisco Art Institute. But when I started to circle, out of nowhere, I can't tell you why, I started reading Heidegger. And I got a fury and a fire to understand what the hell he was saying. And I don't know why. And what was interesting is that I still don't quite understand what he's saying. And I've come to understand that he doesn't understand what he's saying. However, that's kind of the point. Because in a sense, for me, And it's actually kind of like this with Jordan Peterson and to a lesser degree for me, Sam Harris, that in order to try to understand him or not understand him, I had to step so far in reading him, so far outside of my frame of reference in order to kind of look back and see if I can kind of see it, right? And that, I come to realize that intellectual yoga, if you will, right? That stretch transformed my mind. And of course, because it transformed my mind, it transformed my attention. And it came to realize that, and and this is what's interesting, is I didn't realize this for like 2 or 3 years later, after we had developed circling, where I was, for those first 2 or 3 years, where I was like reading Heidegger and then going and circling, reading Heidegger and going and circling, reading Heidegger and circling. And I look back 3 years later and I realized that that, unbeknownst to me, was training my attention to see more. And I started to look at a lot of the terms and the lingo and all that stuff that we now use in circling. And they're essentially Heideggerian, getting someone's world, right? Like aletheia. All those kinds of things are things that were developed as a result, I think, of that grappling with Heidegger, and since then with others. And I've just come to realize that when you read a text that's beyond your own comprehension, right? In a certain sense, you release your mind to the movement of the thought of the other, right? And especially if it's just beyond your ability to comprehend it, it literally, my experience is you begin to think the author's thoughts. And when you start to have another's thoughts, which means in a real deep way, if we're talking about philosophy, it means embodying a different set of presuppositions, right? And when you start to shift your presuppositions about reality, you start to experience a different world. And that's transformation. And so I credit it personally, I credit a lot of my life being given by that kind of grappling with texts. And so when I came across Jordan Peterson, what I really like about him, and then I think you can appreciate this, it's he's pretty much he's pretty right-brained, right? He's very imaginative, right? And I've never seen anyone bring Jung so, in my view, because I was reading Jung in high school, and in my view,
I was too. My shrink gave me Jung.
Oh, I can so tell. But Jung in a very similar way is he circumambulates, right? It's very difficult to understand Jung because he's searching as he's writing. You can tell it's not like he's got a conclusion, but he's sensing and he's circulating as he's writing. And as you do that, you get this deep understanding. But I don't think most Jungians really understand Jung, because I think Jung was a biologist more than anything. I think that he tapped into, and he's looking at deep structures. And Jordan Peterson takes that and goes back where Jung goes back, maybe 5,000-10,000 years. Jordan Peter goes back 200,000 years, right? And he starts talking about dominance hierarchies and all those,
or 12 million years or 3 billion years to life and how life evolved. Yeah.
Yes, totally. And what I've come to realize is that he didn't, for example, in terms of Heidegger, he didn't realize that he didn't discover Heidegger till after he wrote his book. And a lot of what I've gotten out of his lectures, especially, is he really instinctively and on his own came to appreciate this difference between objective or you could say, as Heidegger would say, present at hand versus present to hand. And that he says that so much of our lived experience is not what we think objectively. When you ask me what I believe, right? I'll give you probably like a set of things that I believe, but if you look at how I behave, Jordan Peterson would say that that will tell you what I actually believe. So it's like he really makes this distinction between, I think in phenomenology, they would call it like between the reflected upon world, right, and the pre-reflective world. And he does it in such a precise way that it's really quite intoxicating in my view. What is it you like about Sam Harris?
Well, so it's a particular kind of precision. He's saying, look, in reality, we build our worlds based on what we believe to be true.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We build our worlds on what we believe to be true.
Right. Right.
So let's actually critically analyze what we believe to be true. Let's apply the scientific method to our ideas.
Right. Right.
And in that sets up a nice little recursion, right? Until you're really looking at reality as best you can. And I think to set the context for this video and that video in terms of crowdsourcing what went wrong in the video, right? Because I think that's fair. And if I were to summarize my piece of that, I would say that on Jordan's side, he did not clarify that he is completely coming at this process from a whole different world, and everything Sam is used to thinking just isn't going to apply. Totally. He said that very casually. Oh, yes, the things I'm saying are completely outside of the realm of normal reality. And yes, this does deconstruct everything that we understand as knowledge. Yeah, sure.
Right.
And that was simply not adequate for the level of request that he was making. So in my world, Sam is an individual human being who lives his life. Jordan is an individual being who lives his life, and they come together in conversation. That conversation is like a game, right? It's got certain rules, it's got certain understandings. And one of the things you need to do when you get together in those conversations is make sure you're playing the same game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like to say that in a game, there are no unilateral moves. Yeah. Except the choice not to play.
Well, I thought that actually, I don't know if this is true, but it seemed like Jordan came to the interview having really looked at Sam Harris's work. And I just got the impression that like kind of Sam was like, all right, like everyone wants me to listen to this guy, and just I didn't have time to really look at his work, so I'll figure it out as we go. That was my sense of it anyways. And so I think that, I don't know if that's true, but that was just my sense.
Yeah. Well, I think both you and I have spent, I don't know how many dozens of hours, perhaps hundreds of hours studying Jordan's work.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So we have a somewhat rich experience of it, and Sam probably spent a few hours. But what I'll say is, unless you've read Maps of Meaning, unless you've actually done his courses where he goes into this, Jordan started off questioning the metaphysics of Western science.
Yep.
Right. He started off there, and which means basically he's coming in playing a game, a conversational game, which is completely different than the normal game. And he didn't make that sufficiently clear.
Right. Got you.
And so Sam kept trying to play the game that he thought was normal science. Right? Now, on Sam's side of the equation, I think his great mistake is something that he does a lot, right? Is that he's got his game about how he approaches things. And he insists that everyone play his game if they're going to be in conversation with him. Like, my rules of the game are how the game's going to be played.
Right.
I am going to engage in this conversation according to a certain framework.
Yeah.
And if you don't agree to my framework, then you are being an idiot.
Well, what would you say? What would you say is, if you were to speculate, why does he do that?
Okay. Well, okay. So two parts of it. One is that he really believes that the way he's approaching things is eminently reasonable.
Mhm.
And he wants to create an eminently reasonable conversation in the world. That's what he's about.
Right. Right.
Right. And so it makes so much sense to him
Yeah.
that he has difficulty stepping outside of it. And if I were to fault him, right, I would say that he is he's unaware of how much of my rules and my rules only he brings to the conversation, right? He's got his rules, Jordan's got his rules, and when you're in conversation, you have to create a shared set of rules about how you're going to converse. Otherwise, you just talk past each other.
Yeah, totally.
And the evidence that I'll suggest for Sam is that he's consistently saying things, and this is across conversations. It was just so clear in Jordan because Jordan was very clear about what he was doing, and most people aren't.
Yeah.
Most people pretend like they're playing Sam's game, but they're not, and so his critiques are often much better.
Yeah.
But he says things like, "It's obvious that you must concede that, right? It's you have to believe this, and you cannot possibly be saying this."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And how I translate that in the rules of the game that I'm playing, the conversational rules of the game,
Mm-hmm.
about what logic is, what rationality is, what reasonableness is, what science is.
Yeah.
The way that you're approaching this is illegitimate in that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Right. And I feel so confident in that I can just, say, right. When Jordan says, "I think you understand me fine. You just can't believe it." He didn't say that. Right. If he had said, "Look, yeah, you understand me fine. You just can't believe that I'm saying something as radical as I'm saying."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Sam at one point said, "Wait a minute. If you're going to deconstruct truth in the way that you're deconstructing it, that is much more egregious than someone suggesting a pronoun that you use."
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you're going to enter into a game and say you have to play the game where truth must cash out in the end. I'm a pragmatist. Truth has to cash out in survival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If it doesn't cash out in survival, it's not truth.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. That is a radical notion given the scientific paradigm in which we live.
Now, was it, but hang on a second. So William James,
Yes.
I think a lot of people wouldn't say that he's radical. What maybe that's just my opinion. I've projected on everybody else.
Okay. So this is where it's the story that you're telling.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is where it's the story you're telling.
Right. And so for you, when you say story, what do you mean? Just so for
the narrative frame through which you understand something.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Right. How do I understand it? Of the 100 stories I could tell about what's happening,
mm-hmm.
which is the one that I focus on? For example, Jordan was using a story of, let's question the nature of truth. I want to question the nature of truth.
Yes.
Because by questioning the nature of truth, it opens up a new conversation that I believe is absolutely critical and valuable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
Is Sam saying like, yes, and truth has a nature.
Yes. And that's where the disconnect in their world is. That's the disconnect in their story. That's the disconnect in the narrative framework that they're bringing to the conversation, the rules of the conversation.
Right. Totally.
And you ask, why does Sam do this?
Yeah.
Sam does this. Yeah. So I was, if you wanted to say something, but
no, I just
why does Sam do this? Sam does this because if you accept the fundamental framework that he's suggesting,
mm-hmm.
you have an incredible tool with which to build a shared reality, which is consistent with science.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And he wants to build a shared value system where the really smart people all agree about what's really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're really smart and you really look at it, you're going to see that moving away from the ultimate pain for the most people for the longest period of time, right? If you imagine every sentient being in the universe in absolute agony forever,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's agony across time and across population.
Mm-hmm.
If you take that as a standard, anything away from that is good.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if
Totally.
you could actually move to incredible pleasure and beauty and depth across the whole spectrum for long periods of time, that
Right.
would be good. And if you accept these basic propositions, then any thinking person will agree with this. And then we can have a real conversation.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pause right there. Okay. Hang on one second. Hang on. I'm going to pause right there. I'm going to put the video on pause too.
Okay.
I think
Recording.
we just had to pause for a moment because my cleaning lady came.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So why does Sam do it? Sam has a tremendous insight, which I agree with him about, which is that if you want to build a shared value system, you must build a shared framework from which you can look at values. And you might as well use the same scientific framework that allows us to be having this conversation, even though we're in different locations and we're recording it, we can put it up on the net, that allows us to send a probe to Mars, land it, and send back pictures. Whatever it is about science that allows us to do things that are that intensely complex and beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's use that to examine values.
Right. Right.
If we did that, we could actually further the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that is an absolutely extraordinary framework and enterprise for him to be engaged in.
Yeah.
So why does he do it? Because he's latched onto something which is so, in my language, it's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
It has the potential to lead to so much thriving.
Mm-hmm.
That he has devoted his mind and heart and career in order to furthering that process.
Right. Totally. And it's
Jordan Peterson, if you haven't read Maps for Meaning, if you haven't watched his Maps for Meaning course, if you've just watched the various videos that he's done over the course of the last 3 months around anti-PC culture,
mm-hmm.
right? And what he considers to be a totalitarian use of language
Mm-hmm.
around that, and the fact that that's going into law, and that's problematic, right?
Right.
He looks back at totalitarian systems and says, this is classic textbook totalitarian language. Hello, everybody. We don't want to do this. I'm not going to participate. So if you've just watched that, you would not understand how radical his view of truth is.
Right. Right.
And so I do think that Sam was completely taken aback by that. Because you say, are pragmatists radical? Yes! Yes, they're radical. Now, they're basic American philosophers, and so we think of them as normal. But if you're in the field of philosophy, postmodernism is radical.
Mm-hmm.
Heidegger is radical. They're undermining the basic framework of Western science.
Right.
They're saying this whole Enlightenment ideal, which says that you can actually understand what reality is and build a world based on that,
Mm-hmm.
is complete illusion. I consider that radical.
I take issue with that. I don't think they're saying it's complete illusion. I don't think they're saying that at all. I think what they're saying is that like, in order to understand reality as an objective and have an objective truth, that is a particular frame that we take that then reveals the world that way. And I don't think that they're saying that like that's not real or that's an illusion. I would say that like there is a facticity, right, that you can conceive, but that facticity only unfolds from our perspective, and that science is a valid perspective, right? And I think that Jordan Peterson, like Peterson would say, it's like too yet to be determined like how valuable it is, because in the long chain of things, right, because he's a pragmatist, we don't really know yet. It's only 500 years old or something, which is very short amount of time. And so far, it's like come very close, like as he says, it's come from a pragmatist perspective, that science has been used in ways, right, that have almost destroyed us a few times. And he's going like, I'm not so sure about your little, like looking at science to derive values is something that that it actually does, right? Or that
he is certainly making that argument.
Did I get like, so I just want to, I want to like, so the issue that I took with you, did I actually take an issue with you, or were?
Oh, yes. So I'll agree and submit that they're not saying that the scientific worldview is not true in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
It's arbitrary.
Right.
It's arbitrary.
Yeah.
You don't have to take
motive to do it. It seems like it can't be arbitrary if like, because people go through a lot of trouble to do science. Science is hard.
Well, but okay. So, but let's take a step back. Okay. Let's take a step back. You and I both have friends who study Hindu and Buddhist meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They learn entire languages just so they can understand the concepts of the meditation.
Right.
They study it for 40 and 50 years, and there is an entire tradition that is designed just to explore that world.
Yeah. In fact,
the difficulty of the endeavor has nothing to do with whether or not it's arbitrary.
Okay. Yeah. Wait a minute. The difficulty of the endeavor has nothing to do with whether or not
it's the Western scientific paradigm,
right,
which says that there is a reality, we can know it. We
right.
can choose to act in the face of it in partnership with others in order to create beautiful things.
Right. Totally.
Right. Those 5 things. There is a reality.
Yes.
We can know it.
Yes.
We can choose to take action in partnership with others in service of something beautiful.
Right. Totally.
Right. That fundamental paradigm is arbitrary. That's Jordan's point. That's Heidegger's point. That's the pragmatist's point. Now, you can say that there's a difference between saying that it's arbitrary and saying that it's illusion. And I think that's an important distinction to make. To say that something is arbitrary is different than saying it's an illusion.
Yeah.
But it cashes out exactly the same. To use the pragmatist term, once you decenter the Western scientific paradigm, and you say that it is just one of several paradigms and that it has its own limitations, right? Which I think is true.
Yeah.
Right? Once you say that, you have unmoored society. Because if we all lived in tribes and we grew up with the same story, that story could create a shared reality in which we share values. But that's gone. There ain't no mythological story. There ain't. It just doesn't exist. There's no there. There is no mythological story that everyone buys into, that everyone is familiar with in the way that they need to be familiar with it in order to use it as a guide for ethical action.
Except though, and I'm not sure if I'm agreeing with you or not, or just like enhancing or going along with what you're saying or not. Except though that the presuppositions that we end up constructing our world with and seeing stuff like science, what allows that, aren't scientific.
Bullshit. They are scientific. How is it that Jordan studied Jung and Jung went out and looked for evidence and built up generalizations based on the evidence? He used the scientific method. Jung used the scientific method. Heidegger used the
process of abstracting. Like he's the process of abstracting. He looked at themes and he abstracted it out.
The scientific method.
Well, wait a minute. People have been abstracting way before science.
What?
People have been abstracting way before science. Like people abstract all. Like
science has always existed,
right? Right?
So absolutely, I would say science has always existed. When human beings became human, they became human when they came to terms with the world.
Right.
Right. They had all their experience, and they got to the point where they understood things. Things were sufficiently stable mentally. They could abstract to a point where they could start to name things. They came to terms with the world.
Yes.
Right? That is the fundamental scientific process.
Yes.
It's to say, of all the ways I can look at this, I'm going to look at it a particular way. Right? And I'm going to name that. And now that I've named it, it becomes a tool of mind. And I can now build stuff. And that's where you get the major initial civilizations.
Now the thing, when you say science, okay, like, and when Sam Harris says science, and when Jordan Peterson says science, well, actually, I think that's more of like to kind of get at what we're.
It's the different worlds.
Yeah. What would you say Jordan Peterson is calling science and Sam is calling science? Because Jordan Peterson is science. He does like research, the big five. He's a psychologist and he's doing research and he's doing the scientific method.
Yes. And I think this is where Jordan Peterson just has a really tough time. His position has a really tough time. He can certainly create a pragmatic world in which his position steps outside of science. Right. So Ken Wilber differentiates between science and scientism. Right. And Ken Wilber says there's a scientific method, which is essentially build an injunction, create a hypothesis, right? Test the hypothesis and share your results with other people who have tested the same hypothesis.
Right.
But that's the fundamental, he calls those the three strands of valid knowledge.
Right.
That, if we take that as a scientific method, certainly Jordan is using the scientific method. Right? But you can't say, no, science is only anything we can measure in numbers, which different people can measure differently. Like different people can all measure the same thing and they'll get the same measurement. And that's all science. Science is only limited to that bit. And Ken Wilber would call that scientism. And I think that that's what Jordan is accusing Sam Harris of.
Okay, got you. And would you accuse Sam Harris of that?
No.
Okay.
No. I think so. Here's the part where it's my critique of Sam Harris. He does it enough that in conversation, if someone disagrees with him, he goes, "You can't possibly believe that." He says, "It's obvious that. You must accept that. You must posit that. You must. This is right." And to that degree, yes, he is exhibiting a scientistic or a scientism dogmatism.
Which is a kind of, like, you could say, is a kind of dogmatic religion in a certain sense, right?
No, I wouldn't say religion. I wouldn't say religion, because if you're going to do that, you're fundamentally changing the definition of what we understand religion to be. In the same way, and you can absolutely do that. You can say, well, religion is just anything. They're the fundamental beliefs, on the fundamental presuppositions on which you build your entire world. And choosing those fundamental beliefs is fundamentally a religious act. And that's what religion is. You can do that. But that is a twisted view of religion. It doesn't cash out in terms of how people actually live in religion.
Now, where religion I think what Jordan would say is that, like, religion is, like, has always been the thing that tells us how to act, right?
Yeah.
And so science. And I also think it's like something about isn't science really about, like, taking an action over and over and over again in an experiment until we find a surprise, and then we go, why is that different than we thought? And then we test that to then discover what reality is, right? Yeah. Through that's kind of the scientific method, isn't it? Something like that.
So
that's my art school.
Yes and no. That is a simplification of the scientific method.
Yeah,
it's a simplification of the scientific method that we teach to school children. in order to introduce them to the concept.
Yes, got you.
Right.
I actually stole that from my Michael Vassar in an interview that he did. I thought it was great.
Yeah, and we love Michael. Michael is entertaining as hell.
Yeah,
we love Michael.
Yeah.
So, and I believe that that's the move that Jordan is making. He's saying, no, religion is this fundamental set of stories that give meaning to it. Because the way I summarize it in my work, I try to create my stupid, clever phrases, right? And the one I use is reason requires a reason to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. This idea of reason has two fundamental meanings. One is it's a methodology, and the second is it's a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And when you take that and apply that to the idea of truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep going. I'm getting.
Yeah. When you apply that to the idea of truth, you can say, okay, there's truth in terms of when you use a rational process, you come to an example that water is 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. Right. That those are the component molecules that make up this thing we call water.
Right. Right.
We've pursued this, and that's truth.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right. And Jordan's saying, no, that's not truth.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, and what is he saying that's true?
He's saying that that's a fact, sure. In that little scientific framework that the pragmatists and the Heideggerians and the postmodernists have largely deconstructed.
I like the base you made there.
You could call that truth, but that's just the arrogance of science that they call that truth. Uh-huh. Right? For most of human history, truth is that which is the good, that which teaches you how to act in the world. And water is composed of 2 hydrogen molecules and 1 oxygen molecule, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. That's true enough, but it's not complete. Mm-hmm. Truth must include that towards which you're moving. It must lead towards some place beautiful. Otherwise, it's not really true.
Is he saying it must, or that you can't not have it be on some level? Like you can't not have it be. This is what I think.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, no. So
not that it's good, but that it involves a human future, right?
Yes. Okay, so let's in order to make the point you're making, I want to divide up 3 different distinctions.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
1.
So 1. I don't need to want anything in order to understand that water is 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, except understanding. Mm-hmm. Fundamental human understanding. Mm-hmm. Right? Now,
what's fundamental human understanding?
Presupposed in that is a human goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Presupposing that as a human goal. So you can say, aha, right. Why do you want understanding? Well, reason requires a reason to use it. Why do you want understanding?
Yeah.
You're smuggling in the ethics by saying that understanding is good, by saying that understanding that a water molecule is made up of 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen atom. The fact that you consider it good to know that is a value system, and it doesn't come from science. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's the second perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
And then what Jordan says, which I'm going to say is so provocative that he is remiss in not putting up front exactly how provocative this is, and saying something along the lines of, this is going to completely blow your mind, and we have to create a whole new game to have this conversation. Because this conversation does not fit into the normal game. Right? No one plays the game like I play it. But it's the way I'm going to play it. So we need to have that negotiation. He's not clear about that. He just says, yeah, of course, I'm undermining truth as you know it in science. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Problematic. Yeah, I understand. Mm-hmm. Right. He's not clear enough on how radical this thing is. So what Jordan is saying is that the survival of humanity must be included in your understanding of water in order for it to be true. Mm-hmm. It might be a fact in this little limited scientific paradigm that water is 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Sure, that's a fact. And sure, having that framework allows us to build modern civilization.
Right.
And that's pretty impressive. And I'm not bemoaning that. I'm not begrudging the fact that science has done things for humanity but it's not true unless it leads to the survival of the species. And we don't know if we're going to survive with this idea. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we're not going to call, I will not call the fact that water is H2O, I will not call that true. I will not let that description of that fact stand as truth.
Right. Gotcha. And now Sam Harris says, what?
He says, you can't be serious. You can't possibly be saying that. Right? You
Why,
can't.
why, Sam? Why can't they say that? What's wrong with saying that in order for it to be true, it must lead to survival? And
yes.
Yeah, it's
yes.
What I heard you say is like what I heard Sam say, or Jordan say that, yeah, in your little frame of scientific frame, yeah, it's factually true, but we don't know yet, according to my definition, whether or not it's I would call it truth.
Yeah. So there's a word that we call arrogance, right? And I think Sam unfortunately gets arrogant sometimes. Like, it must be this way. You can't be saying this. This is like, he takes a stance in which he is so right that anybody who disagrees with him is just friggin' wrong and idiotic. That's arrogance. There's another kind of arrogance.
Yeah.
Which is to say, I am going to choose a definition of a word. And this is the irony that Sam called out in Jordan. I am going to determine how a word is going to be used, which is different than every other scholar in human history. I come from no real tradition. Perhaps I'm a Jungian, but Jung didn't make that. Jung didn't make that distinction of truth must include. He didn't make that as explicit as Jordan is, right? Perhaps I haven't read enough Jung, and he did. But like you said, most Jungians don't understand Jung. This is a very, very small minority position on the single fundamental bedrock on which all of the conversation is going to hang.
And he would say that he got that from Darwin, right?
He does. No other Darwinists think that.
Well, what is Darwin like? So like Darwin would probably say, "I am not a Darwinian. I'm Darwin," right?
Well, no. So
I'm not sure.
Darwin essentially thought he was a Darwinian.
Okay.
In the sense of there are always people who will misrepresent your work and claim really stupid.
I know.
They'll claim really stupid, outrageous stuff. And then say, like Marx says, if that's what you think I said, then I'm not that, because you didn't read my stuff.
Totally.
Right? So
I'm not going to say much more about that for me.
Okay. So the Darwinian paradigm is that random mutation gets selected for based on fitness, and that which survives is that which is a fit to reality, and therefore survival is the principle by which you cash out whether or not something is evolutionarily fit.
Right.
Now you can take that idea, which Jordan does, and say, okay, let's take this metaphor. Truth, right? What we're going to call truth must cash out in survival in the same way that in order to consider a mutation evolutionary fit, we have to look at whether or not it survived. That's the criteria. Well, we can do the same thing with knowledge. We can just say, if it survived, it's true.
Right.
Really? Really? Is that the standard you want to set? Happen to survive.
Well, actually, he would say that in when he talks about Becker's work, right? He says like the problem with Becker is he's like it's all about essentially the fear, like the protecting us from the fear of death, and he says, and Jordan says, like, no, like there's things that are a lot worse than dying, right? Like children dying, right? Being tortured forever than dying, like to place just survival on top of as the ultimate thing. He's like, that's where Becker went wrong. And so maybe there's actually a conflict. Maybe that's kind of speaking to a contradiction within Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. Well. So during the during the conversation, he basically said you have to cash out in survival. So we could find the part in the conversation where he actually said that, and perhaps his point was more subtle.
Right.
But I think this is the big challenge that he has, is that he has a particular narrative frame. He has his particular narrative frame.
Yeah.
Right. It's different than the typical scientific narrative frame.
And what you're saying is that where he made a mistake in this interview is that, like, he didn't elucidate how radical that was. Right.
Yeah.
So that he's basically saying is like, look, Sam, in order for us to have like a real conversation about this, I want you to get, like, this is very radical. I'm not saying I'm right, but like I'm assuming I'm right based on what I've seen so far. Right? If we want to talk about these other things, like, let's go along and have the conversation, and I'll try on your presupposition and look at it, and you try on yours and look at it, and let's see if we can learn something.
So yes, I think he's saying something even cooler and even something more fucked up.
Cooler and fucked up. That sounds good.
Right. He's not saying I'm assuming that what I'm saying is right based on the fact that I've done it. He's saying this is what I've come up with. I might be wrong. Follow me on the conversation.
Right.
Follow me on the conversation. At the end, you'll get to decide for yourself.
Right.
Which I think is even cooler than saying I assume that I'm right. And at the end of this, you're going to agree with me. I kind of think that, right? Because I've looked at this a lot. But let's find out.
Right.
I think that's really cool. But he's not accepting Sam's presuppositions. He's insisting that this whole thing hinge on this new understanding of truth, which is radical. Now he can say again, well, before we had the scientific revolution, before we had the realm of enlightenment, right? Before we really had the subject-object dichotomy and measurement and empiricism, right? The idea of truth that you're talking about, Sam, didn't really exist. There was only what works.
Right. And we still did all right. Like,
yeah. And I think that is a legitimate argument. I think it's factually and fundamentally untrue. Right? People throughout history did not go, yeah, this is a really neat story. We tell this story because it's a good story to tell.
No, they acted it out without knowing what they were like.
And they thought it was true. And they thought it was true in the scientific sense. That's the presupposition in it. Say
that again. I want to get at that more.
Yes. So
they thought it was just so when, just to be clear. So when an old culture acted out like a ceremony, right, in a mythology, that from their perspective, they're saying that they're using science,
classic
suppositions of science, right, to justify what they're doing as the rituals that they're doing. That's how they're explaining it, because they believe it's true factually.
Well, so during the actual ritual, I don't think that they really think that they understand that the ritual is symbolic.
Right.
But they want everyone to believe that the Pharaoh is the lineage of God.
Right.
They're not saying, let's kind of treat the Pharaoh as if he's the great father, as if he's no, they're saying he is God.
Yeah.
And they're cashing in on the fundamental scientific idea of truth, which is we are accurately describing reality. This is not a symbolic understanding, right? This is why Ken Wilber, when he describes the pre-trans fallacy, he uses Jung as the paragon example of the second part of the pre-trans fallacy, where you elevate magic into transcendence. Right? Yes, we can say from a mythological perspective, I think Jordan is right, that before people had logic, you have to try to get them to act in concert with one another. You have to try to coordinate people's actions without their understanding.
Right.
How do you do that? You tell stories and people believe the stories, and the stories give them enough of a framework that they take on their role with a certain amount of meaning and participation, and that story makes the society work.
Okay. Pause right there. So what I want to look at, like,
hell yeah.
Okay. So
it's fun being delirious, by the way.
Yes, a different deliria that you're. Yeah.
I'm in such an altered state from my
Stomach flu.
virus. It's crazy, but it's fun. So hopefully I'm making sense. So continue. Sorry, meta commentary on the relationship. I'm just noticing how surreal this experience is because
So I'm not sure if, like, you can tell me whether or not this is different than what you're saying. I think that I don't know. See, it seems like science requires a certain level of being able to step, like, kind of, you could say, abstract out the rules and then be able to write them down, right? And then apply those rules back to the level of which you abstracted on, right? Like,
the more you do that, the more complex your knowledge becomes.
Totally. And when we go back in time, right, less complexity, right?
Yes.
We were doing these rituals and these rules, and we were following rules, but we had not yet abstracted them out and then applied them there. That we were.
Yeah.
We were. Now here's the thing about this. Actually, this is a good question, like, that I think I have as I'm coming to it, which tells me we're in a real conversation. Like, is that they were kind of having a kind of embodied cognition of it. They were living it, that they knew exactly what to do. But if you stopped and asked them, why were they doing it? On what premises were they doing it? They would sit there and they'd go, we don't think like that. Like, what do you mean premise? Like, I don't think that they were having arguments whether or not that's true, and therefore somebody else.
And so in order for it to be science, you have to be having arguments about it. You have to be abstracting it into a language that you can metacognate. You have to do metacognition in order for it to be science. It sounds to me like in your world, the one you're describing.
No, I'm actually going, I'm going like, I think I'm just trying to see if we're talking about the same thing.
So I'll say something which might clarify it, or it might be. So I said earlier that the thing that made human beings human.
Yeah.
Right. What is it that we call humanity? Right. And when humanity came into existence,
right,
I'm suggesting it's when we came to terms with reality. Right. Language, being able to name something and then take a process in the world, a thing, a movement, a season, and name it, allowed you to abstract it. Once you've named it, you now have a mental tool and you can now operate on the world.
Right.
That human being fundamentally is coming to terms with the world. And that's what allowed us to become human versus animal.
Now, would you say that is an evolution? Is that evolution?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
and it is a difference in kind.
Yes.
It is not a difference in scope. It's a difference in kind.
Yeah.
When human beings came into existence, when we started naming things, when our brain evolved to the point where we could have abstract concepts and name them, and then use those words, use those naming conventions.
Which started with the Greeks.
No. This started 12,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago.
Okay.
Homo sapiens sapiens named shit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, or rather,
okay.
There's something about pre-Greeks. So if you could, in the premise I'm suggesting, human beings became human when they came to terms with the world. What the Greeks did is they came to terms with terms. They started the metacognition, where you started looking at your abstractions and abstracting about the abstractions.
Right.
And that's when you create logic. That's right. One
is that creating logic, or is that logical?
It's the explication. Logical? It's the explication of what the smart people do. I'm serious about that.
That's great. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The Egyptian civilization was built on the scientific understanding of the flooding of the Nile.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Some really smart people used science. They looked at the Nile and they started measuring, literally measuring where the
Mm-hmm.
height of the Nile was at different times of the year.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And over the course of years, they came to the idea, if the Nile's going to be here on this date,
Yeah.
that means that by the time we get to this date, it's going to be here. When it's at its fullest, it's going to be here.
Yeah.
Pure science.
Yeah. Now, what did they call it? Like, what were they doing?
So they.
Right. Like,
So I think they didn't have the distinction.
What's that?
They didn't have the distinction. The smart people were just smart. They were leaders. They were the shaman and the headman, you could say, in the tribal system. And once we got into agrarian society, right? What is agrarian society? We started studying seeds. We started naming seeds. We started saying, look, we can plant these seeds at a particular time. We create a story around what that is, which is good enough for the stupid people.
Okay.
And every once in a while, you get somebody really smart who actually furthers that knowledge. They actually go, wow, this particular seed, if we plant it at this time versus this time, grows more. Somebody really smart used science to figure that out. And then they went to the rest of the people and they went, look, if we plant it here, it grows like this. And they're like, and the rest of the people are like, whatever, man. That's a level of thought that I cannot do. You're using a level of abstraction that I cannot follow. And so he went, look, God said that we planted at this time so that we can have the best harvest. And they went, okay.
That is like that, Mark. That is not, that seems to be such a simplistic explanation.
Sure, it's simplistic, but you take that and you add enough permutations and you get all the world's religions. All the world's religions are local.
Yeah.
They fit the particular context and the particular seeds that the people were planting, and the particular and that's Jordan's talk. I mean, that's Jordan's basic idea.
Yeah,
is that there was a story. We call it religion. We call it myth. And that structured people's ideas, that structured their mind enough.
Oh, hang on a second. He would say that actually, no, it's way more bottom up than that. People didn't tell stories to explain their experience. People's experience was organized by the stories.
Who created the story?
All the way in biology.
This is chicken and so I would say so. And again, this is just experientially. I just want to call myself on how much trippy fun this is.
Yeah.
To be having this conversation. There's a chicken and egg issue here. Mm-hmm. Yes, the story structured their experience. Absolutely. Somebody created the story.
I don't think it was somebody. It's like
okay, stop for a second. Stop for a second.
Yeah. Okay.
Where did the story come from if it was not created by somebody?
I think it emerged in language. I don't think it was a somebody. I think it was a coordination in language that emerged
over time
from our presuppositions, right? Upon which language is then built and feeds back into. I don't think if you start talking about individuals came and like that were smarter and then told it in the language of the story for the people, I just think that is like so.
So let's take the Darwinian process.
Yeah.
Let's take the Darwinian process.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
At some point, someone planted something at a particular time in a particular way, and it grew more than others.
Right. Totally.
Okay. Now, did that person create an entire story in order to make sense of that? No. They built on the stories that had come before it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They adapted the stories that came before it.
Yeah.
But every single one of those innovations was done by an individual.
Totally. Okay. Now, if we say, okay, I'm going to take that. Okay. I'm going to take that and like play that forward a little bit. Okay. So I would say that like, what is it that makes that individual smarter? Right. It's like he stands, as what I'm hearing you say is he stands out above in a certain way, a level, like he has the ability to, in the
To
Peterson
abstract.
sense, to abstract.
He does science. He does science better than the other people. Yeah.
Right. Like which what I would imagine, like what would that presuppose? Does he have more self-consciousness than the idiots that like he has to translate into it? Is that an evolution?
You have to define self-consciousness in order for me to answer that. But I think the easiest answer is yeah.
Okay. So here's a question I have is that what that says then, I think what that says is that his subjectivity, right? His subjectivity complexified, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Complexified. And in that subject, like his subjectivity is, he can go, okay, my thought about this, I can abstract this out and apply it back to that category. I have a higher level of complexity to my observation. These people out here have a very different sense of subjectivity than I do. And because I can kind of see it, right? I now need to like tell the story. I need to tell what I'm doing in terms of the story in order for them to have the buy-in.
Sort of.
Okay.
Sort of. I think that your description requires a level of distinction in terms of self-consciousness. Like I said, it depends on how you define self-consciousness.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. So I grow up in a culture in which there is a story about who we are as a people and how we live. And our entire culture is based on that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that story is oral. It changes based on whoever happens to be telling it and what they think is important.
Right.
And so it's not abnormal for someone to slightly change a story, to enhance a story.
Yeah.
That's part and parcel of who I am.
Yeah.
I just happen to have a piece of knowledge that, to the degree that I'm successful in creating a story that other people buy and integrate and pass on orally.
Okay.
To the degree, and this is Darwinian. I think Dawkins and Jordan Peterson are absolutely accurate on this, right? I might notice that you plant this seed at this particular time in this particular way, and it leads to more growth.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't tell the story in a way that other people will pass it on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The story doesn't pass on.
Yeah, now it's marketing, right?
It Darwinian fails until somebody else creates that same scientific discovery. It doesn't. Nobody else ever creates that scientific discovery, and that insight, that scientific insight, that coming to terms with reality, gets lost forever because Darwinian didn't make it in the culture. It didn't make it in the story.
Yeah.
And that's what science is. Science, modern science, right? The Enlightenment vision of science is, hey, wait a minute. And the Greeks did this as well. They went, look, everybody's got different stories, right? The Greeks were in the center of this trading thing where all the people came from all over. And everybody had different stories.
Totally. That's a big difference, right?
And so they started looking at what are the patterns among the stories. They came to terms with terms. They told stories about the stories.
As people started to speak different, in other words, what you're saying is like, so I'm going to do the thing with you that I don't think that Sammy did with Jordan.
Yeah.
So basically what I heard you say is I'm going to go on your ride. And find out where we come from, and actually kind of see if I could actually like, if I go on your ride, do I come back to myself different? Right? Did I learn something? I don't think that Sam, even after he listens to this, I wonder if he's going to be open to this, right? And go on that ride. But I also want to talk about like why he thinks that he couldn't do that unless he got that straight with Jordan. But before we go, I just want to put that as a marker. So basically, like what you're saying is that the Greeks, as more trade started to happen and they got exposed to different terms, they were like, whoa, like there are no like terms that like before that, all we had was one world in which we all spoke the same terms. Therefore, terms weren't terms to us. They were just the things that we used to understand. And then we saw other people had hands behind their head that went like this, that had these understandings. And they were like, wow, they're responding to things differently. Whoa, they point to that and it includes this. We point to that same thing and it only includes this. What are they seeing? And then terms, subject, object.
They came to terms with terms.
Okay,
Yes.
Got you. That motion, like that movement, is that movement, like this is where we start to get into like Krzyzewski and stuff, like, which is a whole other world, which I think that Peterson really liked. Peterson uses
he's totally in this 20th century deconstructed post-Kantian world. Absolutely.
Right.
Including Korzybski. Oh, so distraction. Continue with your point.
Okay, got you. So did I get that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Kind of lost. I lost our place.
Mm-hmm.
I lost our thread.
Mm-hmm. So in coming to terms with terms.
Okay, got you. Mm-hmm.
We now create a new story
mm-hmm.
with a whole new set of vocabulary and new possibilities,
mm-hmm.
and that is truly revolutionary.
Right.
We talk about the revolution of philosophy for good reason.
Yeah.
Because for the first time, right, gets back to the self-consciousness point you were talking about. Like, how do stories in early cultures, aka primitive cultures that do not have philosophy, they do not have this meta level understanding,
mm-hmm.
right? How do the stories pass on?
Orally.
And what that means is, I'll demonstrate. I'm going to talk to kids. So we did this and that, and then the thing happened. And then the other thing happened, and the thing happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Storytelling,
right?
Your ability to tell stories, largely determined whether or not the story got moved forward.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could tell stories that are stupid,
mm-hmm.
right? Like the ghost dance,
mm-hmm.
right? In the Native Americans, tragically, like tragedies within tragedies, they believed that if they did a particular dance, they would be immune to bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Someone told that story
mm-hmm.
convincingly.
Yeah.
It fit into the rest of the stories. Darwinian fit.
Mm-hmm.
People believed it. They acted on it, and they got massacred.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Didn't cash out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Wasn't true in Jordan's sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Why didn't it cash out? Because it wasn't true in Sam Harris's sense.
Mm-hmm. Right. Got it.
Right? I believe that Jordan presupposes Sam Harris's model. He presupposes abstraction. He presupposes coming to terms with terms.
Mm-hmm.
He presupposes the Renaissance shift into individuals. Like individuals are the place of action.
Got it.
Right? Then the Enlightenment came along and they combined all of that into this idea of individual rights.
Yeah.
Right? There's certainly an evolution, and that all happened Darwinian. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't based on science in Sam Harris's terms, right? You tell the story. The skill of the storyteller is probably the single most important thing that determines whether or not it gets moved forward. Trump is a great storyteller. He tells the story. Doesn't matter if it's true. People believe it.
Pushes around salience is what he does, right?
What?
He just plays with salience, right? Like
well, I mean,
like the reality, like this, what's salient and what is real.
To be fair to Trump, that's what politics is. Politics is telling stories which are determined based on Darwinian principles,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And then the government actually tries to do it, and it doesn't work, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but it's the storyteller who determines whether or not a story gets picked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right now, if the story that's picked up is inconsistent with reality,
Mm-hmm.
it'll probably lead to the destruction of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that culture will either die out, and therefore its stories will die out,
Mm-hmm.
or a new prophet will come and tell a new story and convince enough people that people abandon the old story and move to the new story.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And yes, I agree, all of that happens Darwinian.
Yeah.
But this science thing, this thing that happened with the Greeks, is that we created a meta level critique. That we could actually look at the ideas, we could look at the stories, and see if they were coherent.
Right.
In like Jordan says many, many times to Sam, yeah, your worldview is coherent. I'm not saying it's not coherent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? It's just not headed for truth in the way that I want. I think the big challenge for Jordan is okay, so how do you ever determine what's true? And I think Sam had some just knockdown, drag out complaints with Jordan. It's really sad that they didn't continue the conversation so that we could see if Jordan's ideas actually cashed out, or whether or not they're self-referential in a way that causes them to explode, which I believe fundamentally. It's not even that he's wrong. He's just not right enough. It's like the same thing he's saying about Sam. Yes, this is a coherent view. You can do all kinds of stuff, but it's not true enough.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And until you integrate Sam and Jordan, it's not enough. It's not true enough.
So it's like, what would an integration of the two of them from your vantage point be? Like, in other words, what would Sam walk away with and be like, and then we start hearing different, like, what would happen to Sam if they were to, like, really learn from each other? What would happen to Jordan if they would really learn from each other? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah. I think that's fascinating. I don't think that's going to happen.
We should maybe put this in the beginning so we can maybe enroll them in.
Sure. So I don't think that's going to happen, by the way.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that's going to happen because they both are representatives of a story.
Yeah.
That if they abandon that story, they lose the best representative which exists. And I think they both feel a certain loyalty, a certain responsibility to make sure that story gets told. So I don't think this is going to happen, but it would look something like this from my perspective, right? Yeah. My integration of them is that Sam would say, okay, we're just going to take a hypothetical, right? I'm unwilling to give you the word true. I'm unwilling to let you say that true is what you say it is. Not going to do it. But let's call it Blorg.
Call it what?
Blorg. Let's create some new term for what you're calling true, and we'll create a new term for what I'm calling true. And I won't use true, and you won't use true, and so we can just avoid that whole snarl. Right? But what that means is, as Sam,
this reveals something right there, right? That if we can call it different names and then go on with the conversation, I think that reveals something right there about.
Yes, and I think if Jordan were more upfront about the fact, look, I'm challenging everything. We cannot continue this conversation like a normal conversation. We can't do it. It's not going to work. We have to.
I think he tried to get at that by saying, like, look, I'm like, what I'm talking about, like, yeah, this is like true within that frame, but like
failed radically. In terms of Darwinian fit, he failed radically. He did not communicate how radical his ideas were to Sam. Sam, at the end of the thing, still was going, you can't say that. You must agree this. You must say this. You must. They were playing different games.
Yeah.
Jordan did not sufficiently prepare Sam to say, look, we're going into a hypothetical world. Are you willing to go into this hypothetical world with me?
Would you imagine because he's just so close to it?
Jordan?
Yeah. Or that he doesn't actually realize how radical it is?
Yeah, he's not. So the beautiful thing about this conversation between the two of them is they're both incredibly high-level players.
Yeah, it's huge.
Right? There are so few people who can play the game at the level they're playing it. They're not used to running into people who can actually have such different worldviews and yet still play that game at that level, which is exciting because once they get this, if Sam could say, look, okay, I'm willing, because you're really smart, because you're really articulate, because I am actually impressed by what you have done. I'm willing to suspend the fundamental idea on which I build everything in order to play out the conversation with you and see where it leads.
Mm-hmm.
I can predict that at some point in the conversation, I'm going to say, okay, here's where your thing falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
Right here, we're going to apply your own rule to itself, and the whole thing's going to unravel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? But I'm willing to go on that journey.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
I'm willing to go on that journey so we can find this out, because you are such a high quality interlocutor. Right? You are such a great conversational partner that I'm willing to suspend my fundamental framework.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We'll still keep all of logic. We'll still keep intellectual honesty. We'll still keep rationality. We'll keep all of that. We'll just suspend this key idea of truth as H2O is truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Totally. Right? As we have enough technology in order to be having this conversation kind of truth. I'm going to suspend that.
Yes.
In order to have this. So if they were to do that, then Sam could go on Jordan's ride, and Jordan and Sam in the process would learn the value of the world that Jordan is bringing.
And what is that? What do you imagine?
That this scientific worldview, this arbitrary scientific worldview, right? To insist two things. One, that everyone live within it. Right? That's dumb. Because not everyone can live within that. They're not sufficiently psychologically and philosophically developed to act on those presuppositions. And so if you insist that they do, they're just going to fail. And then they're going to build a relationship to that whole enterprise, which is not good.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
They are going to become incredibly suggestible. And the totalitarian leader who comes along and says, let me give you a simple answer, that answer that Sam Harris is saying, which is really complex, that you don't understand, fuck him. Here's the answer. Mm-hmm. And some totalitarian dictator offers a simple answer. They're going to be sitting ducks for that.
Right. Right.
Because you've called them stupid.
Right.
Because they're not using science.
Yeah.
And so they don't like you. And so they're sitting ducks for everybody else.
Yeah, totally. Right. So I need to pause because my computer battery is running low and I don't have the plug out here.
Okay.
So we pause for a moment, and this is a good thing.
So we could say that that's Sam's side. The integration is.
Yeah.
So in the process.
Yeah. So basically, so I asked earlier, just to kind of recap, because it was a little while ago, is I asked, okay, if they were able to say give different names for what they were calling truth, like blue and red, right? And they used those names instead of using the word truth, and they went on each other's ride.
Then they could go on Jordan's ride. They could have Jordan's conversation.
Totally. And the question is what would happen to Sam Harris by the end of that ride? What would happen to Jordan Peterson on the end of that ride?
Yeah. And so Sam would recognize, I believe, that the concerns that Jordan Peterson is bringing in and the importance of the mythological mind, right? Not this scientific framework where we use logic and rationality to look at facts and then build on facts. And we can build a morality from those facts, right? You are going to be presupposing some moral value. You have to say that truth is valuable, right? And you can say from Goodall's perspective, as Jordan would certainly say, that, okay, well, so that's the story. Right? There's a fundamental moral story in which science becomes useful as a tool. And until you have the moral story, you can't do it. And Sam would say, no, it's built into science. Right? Science is a particular story. Right? Okay, so but that gets into Jordan's side. So what Sam would get is that being able to look at the mythological understanding right? And to rethink about truth
Mm-hmm.
in terms of this embedded value-based truth.
Mm-hmm.
That there aren't, that if it's not true in that sense, it's only a fact.
Mm-hmm.
That is a useful intellectual exercise in which you can connect with a lot more people.
Yeah.
Because you're not only limited to the people who can play your game.
Got you. So it would be like he would be, so Jordan.
So Sam would recognize that Jordan's perspective
Mm-hmm.
has value outside of the normal context in which Sam is normally value, and he would be able to take the various gifts that come from Jordan's perspective and be able to integrate them into his world, and that would be very good for him in terms of being able to communicate his world to the world in such a way that Darwinian, they say yes to it, and therefore they build a morality that's based in science rather than religion. I think that if Sam Harris really went on Jordan's ride, he would be able to enhance his capacity to promulgate his insights.
Okay, did I just hear you correctly saying that like he would be able to like do what kind of the Darwinian evolutionist perspective already does?
No, he'd be able to leverage that in his favor. So right
Okay,
now, Sam Harris is writing books, doing lectures, doing a podcast
Mm-hmm.
in order to accomplish something.
Right.
Right. He wants to create a basic fundamental understanding of humanity that allows us to live together in peace and allows us not to be assholes to one another.
Mm.
Right. Don't kill each other because we disagree.
Okay, so here's what I think. Okay, so just, I don't know if we want to go into this, but that sounds to me a lot like Marx, like in a certain level. Like that sounds a lot like what Jordan is saying is totalitarianism, which is like basically like, look, let's like, you use the word fundamentally what he wants, right, is to find a basis for like human values and morality grounded in science, right?
Sam wants this.
Sam wants this, right?
Yes.
Grounded in science. This is where, in my understanding, what I think Jordan would say is that, like, no, you're doing, like, that's an ideology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing what basically grounded, like, I don't know if it grounded, like, with the Nazis, but, like, with Karl Marx and the USSR, that, like, that essentially that
and China and Pol Pot and Marxism,
right, totally.
Right? Yes, absolutely. Marxism has a premise that Sam doesn't have.
Yeah.
Right, which is kill the people who disagree with you.
Does Marx say that?
He doesn't say kill the people who disagree with you. He says that we must have a revolution in order to overthrow the people who currently have power.
Right. Right.
In the process, we're going to kill them. Right. It's always happened. Every time it's happened, it's led to people getting killed because And whereas Sam is saying, look, we can just agree. Right. You don't have to like use force and kill the people who disagree with you.
Yeah.
You can just say, look, this is a better choice. Let's be smart about this. Let's have a real intellectual conversation. Yeah. If you can come up with a better reason than me, great.
Yeah.
And so certainly Jordan considers Sam's perspective to be ideology, right? Mm-hmm. Jordan uses the terms in very interesting ways, right? Jordan has taken all of the major terms of science and uses them in very particular ways, which are unique to his work, I would say, or not unique, that are outside of the scientific mainstream that Sam represents. Okay, so I think Sam, right, in being able to suspend his perspective and go on Jordan's ride, would discover more effective ways of promulgating his ideas.
Become a better marketer.
He would have a better understanding of the people that he's speaking to.
Yeah.
And therefore he would become more effective
in
promulgating what I believe to be his superior ideas.
Yeah. Gotcha.
right?
Uh-huh.
Jordan, on the other hand, if Jordan were to integrate what Sam is saying, he would have to give up the, well, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jordan's in a really tough position because he has very strong beliefs about what is good and what is bad,
Mm-hmm. Right.
about like what is totalitarian, what leads to totalitarianism, and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And for him, they're true.
Yeah.
In Sam's sense.
Based on the evidence. That's
Yeah.
what you're
In
saying.
Sam's sense,
Like what you're saying,
they're true.
you're saying is he actually does implicitly agree with Sam Harris because he thinks it's true based on what he saw, like the pattern he's seeing based on the evidence.
Yeah.
Which presupposes that like there's an objective world in which that the mind can see, then create language and apply to itself and create theories. And that's basically what you're saying is at root where Jordan gets his stuff is basically the same place that Sam is advocating. He uses these.
Yes. Although his methodology is much more intuition based, much more narrative based,
i.e. better.
From his perspective, better.
From my art school perspective.
But the challenge that Jordan has, and I believe it's a deadly challenge. I believe it's going to unravel his project, unfortunately, because I really love his project. Is that whenever he argues his position, he always argues it. Right? He refers to reality. He refers to the scientific method.
Yeah, totally.
And so he uses it when it suits him, but then abandons it when it gets tough. Mm-hmm. Now, that is a very uncharitable way of putting it. That is an extraordinarily uncharitable way of putting it, and Jordan deserves much better from me. But I fundamentally think that when the rubber hits the road, Jordan's critique of Sam Harris deeply undermines his own position, because in order to have a Darwinian story that succeeds,
right,
it has to be Sam's story. Right, you're not going. In a small tribe, you can get a bunch of people to believe the same story. You can't do it in a cosmopolitan world. And yes, you can say, okay, well, in that case, we should essentially, this is Ken Wilber's Wayback Machine. Well, let's just go back to the point.
Right.
Are you familiar with Ken Wilber's Wayback Machine? It's like the Enlightenment thinkers wanted to go back to Rome. Right.
Oh yeah,
and the Roman thinkers wanted to go back to and they wanted to go back, and finally you get back to the hunter-gatherers. Right. He calls that the Wayback Machine. You're constantly looking for the place before humanity got screwed up.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And I think that Jordan's project is important and valuable because people's stories of how they deal with the fundamental great father, the fundamental great mother, the fundamental hero, and chaos, right? You got to deal with stories that deal with these fundamental human experiences, the truth that he's talking about, this capital T truth, which is that we are conscious in a world which we kind of understand and kind of don't understand. There's the known and the unknown, and all of that gets generated from chaos of the moment-by-moment experience. And we can take a heroic stance and look to extend the father into the mother, to penetrate the mother with the father, right? To find more order in the unknown. And that if we do that from a heroic stance, like Sam is doing, right, we can do that. But what's the difference between a hero and a totalitarian dictator? Right? The hero tells the story. The hero pushes forward the boundary and then comes back and tells a story that people can believe, that people can buy into. And that story, if it's a good story, people buy it. It succeeds from a Darwinian perspective.
Right.
If they buy it, they pass it on.
Yeah.
It becomes a mimetic tradition.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And it doesn't kill you.
Right. Right.
right? And the challenge is that as soon as you get agrarian agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
you set a process in motion that, right, it ends in the singularity.
Mm-hmm.
And Jordan is like trying to stop this process,
Of the singularity.
or he's trying to, or is he trying to enhance it
Right.
by bringing in these levels of meaning? So the charitable interpretation is he's saying, look, it's the meaning that matters. Everything comes down to the meaning. It doesn't matter that H2O doesn't friggin' matter.
Yeah.
It's just completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
What matters is meaning. What matters is beauty. What matters is human
Yeah.
survival and flourishing.
What would you say? Okay. What would you say is, so two things, and I don't know if these will put us on totally different paths or something like that, but like one thing I want to bring up, when you brought up the singularity, I was just thinking about like, yeah, the artificial intelligence kind of was in the back of my mind. Like what would, because Sam's like Sam Harris, like he's kind of on, he's gone on a campaign waking people up to the danger of artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Just like Jordan has gotten on a campaign to wake people up to the dangers of the scientific method as ideology.
yeah.
So both of my
is he going on a campaign? Let's see. Is he going? I think he's going on a campaign saying that like that we view science. My understanding is he's not invalidating science. He's basically saying that science is not. Science thinks that it's disclosing reality, but Jordan's saying is like, but it on purpose removes the whole part of reality called subjectivity on purpose. How could you call that reality if it is disclosing if it doesn't include subjectivity?
Yeah. And this is Jordan's challenge.
No, well, hang on a second. That was pretty smart.
Okay, that was pretty smart.
Okay, I just want to say that.
Hell yes. Sorry,
Okay.
Actually that does deserve recognition. Hell yes.
Thank you.
You
okay.
nail. You
know,
nailed
my narcissistic
very,
format. Now I love you.
my intellectual parent.
If only Sam could have done that, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. But that's. I think they can. I think that they're
enough context. They didn't have enough context for each other.
They didn't have enough context for each other. Yeah, absolutely.
Which makes Jordan Peterson. I think that like that kind of points to what Jordan Peterson is kind of trying to elucidate. Is that he's basically saying like, look, science has a context, right? That in that context presupposes presupposes science, right? And it isn't scientific and basic, right?
Yeah, and that is absolutely his argument.
Right.
That's absolutely his argument.
But so what Sam's saying, he's saying that does not mean it's better.
No, Sam's saying you're wrong.
Okay, all right, got it.
Right. So again, I'm going to be uncharitable to I'm going to be uncharitable to Jordan for a moment. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So Jordan, I believe, is caught in the postmodern trap. It's the Marxist trap. It's the Heideggerian trap. It's the pragmatist trap, which is that this idea is more sophisticated than Sam's scientific story. And it is. It's more sophisticated. It's a meta level. And to go to that meta level is an intellectual achievement. And to be able to hold that meta level and to use it actually constructively, which Jordan does to a very high level. I mean, it's extraordinary how few postmodern philosophers, which I certainly put Jordan in that.
He rips apart the postmodern.
Yeah, he rips on stupid postmodernist philosophers, which is most of them. But he's I mean, yeah. I think he's bought their perspective, lock, sink, and barrel.
Okay, gotcha.
But it's more sophisticated, and that leads him to be arrogant. It leads him to be elitist, like his apology. Right? He looked at that conversation. Jordan Peterson, from my perspective, right? And unfortunately, it's not particularly charitable, but I love him so much. He's such a good guy. this is such a small criticism compared to like the amazing scope of his work and the intellectual integrity of it. He watched that conversation and thought, I won. Sam was inflexible. And it's the standard elitist postmodern thing. It's like, I told Sam that I understood that I was undermining the very idea of truth that science uses. And Sam just couldn't handle it. And when I listened to his apology, the arrogant elitism in his apology, right?
Is what he was accusing Sam of on some level. Yeah.
I mean that's I think that goes both ways. But yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I tell you what, this would probably I think it's a good time to probably like pause and actually like listen to the apology. I mean, I'd like to.
Sure. I think I've gone through the integration because I think it's important. There's what they could have done better, and then what they would get from it. And I think in Jordan's case, he would have to understand that his position is far more dependent on the scientific rationality he is critiquing.
Yeah. Now,
than he admits, and I bring that back to what I say is the guy, the Egyptian scribes who started measuring the Nile, right, and therefore could predict the floods, and therefore could organize societies, and claim godlike knowledge. Right? That was pure science. They told a story.
That one, I have to say though, what was it like that? What was it that I wish I could remember. Maybe you could recount this. Something about Aristotle, like that when Aristotle was talking about, I think he was talking about something that then later became an ism or a branch, right? That then people in that branch then looked at Aristotle, right? And actually they did derive from Aristotle that branch, but then they looked at Aristotle and then said that he was doing whatever that branch was. I don't know what, I wish I could remember what it was exactly. Like it's from my mind.
Heidegger's shift from metaphysics to ontology, I think, is a great summary of what you just said.
Okay, got you. And I think what Heidegger would say is like that they're not that they're not talking about the same thing. That they're very
and that's Jordan's thing. Jordan's we're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and
right?
but here's the thing about it. What is I think for the people I want to get it more, and I want people to get it more. Why is Jordan? What's the value that Jordan's saying that if we get that, right? If we get that, and here's the integration I want to look at it. Like if we actually watching them, both of them, and we integrated it, and all of culture integrated it, why would that be better, right? If we integrated both of them, right? Mm-hmm. Why would that be a better world? If it would be a better world,
because totalitarian dictatorships use scientism to kill hundreds of millions of people. Okay. And if you had Jordan's perspective, you would have a check on that.
Yeah. Okay.
You would have a check on that. Now, I don't think Jordan's position cashes out. Unfortunately, I think it's a great thought. I think it's an interesting thought, but I think it's a version of the Wayback Machine.
Okay, got it.
It's just
it
doesn't cash out. And I would love to have the conversation with Jordan. I would love Sam to have the conversation with Gordon, so I can test if the places where I see that it becomes self-referential and destroys itself, right? That apply to self breaks down his system. I would like to have that conversation with him to find out, because he's really smart.
Yeah. It
might be that he has a solution to the places where I think that he's in trouble. From my perspective, I don't know how he can do it. Because
if anybody could do it, do you think he could?
And the reason I think that is when it comes down to it, he always uses science and straight rationality to prove his points.
Yeah.
He always comes back to, look, read Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag Archipelago, because there's a logic to this. And Solzhenitsyn lays out the logic of how this presupposition leads to this result.
But
I'm saying that is Sam's essential point.
Yeah.
And when Jordan tries to go beyond that to say, no, there's a higher level thing, he always comes back and uses science to justify his positions. And that he cannot justify his own positions using his own positions. I mean, he kind of can, but he knows it's not going to fly. There's going to be no Darwinian cash out with that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if he's really saying that his idea is cash out, then, and he's going to use Sam's method, and you're going to critique Sam's method,
mm-hmm.
I just don't see it. Maybe he's got some little twist of logic where he brings, I mean, he's really smart. I really appreciate it. He thinks he's worked it through. He thinks he has solved this problem. I have not seen in anything he has written or any of his courses that he solves the problem, but he thinks he has. And so I would love to have the conversation to bring him to that point, and I would love for Sam to. I think Sam wants to. It's just that I don't know if Sam can suspend his framework sufficiently to actually go on the ride long enough, so that he can learn Jordan's vocabulary and apply it to itself.
Yeah, I'm imagining that Jordan's what Jordan brings to it that Sam does is that, like, I think that Jordan can include so much more than Sam does.
Yeah, absolutely. He does. His argument is an order of magnitude more sophisticated than Sam's. Now,
because it includes subjectivity, right?
Yeah, that's the game. That's the transcend and include game.
Yeah.
You include it and then you transcend it. But then how do you justify the transcendence? How do you justify the transcendence? How do you justify the transcendence?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yes, you can transcend and include. And yes, postmodernism includes modernism. It understands modernism in a way that modernism doesn't understand itself. It's beautiful.
Wouldn't it? We wouldn't be able to justify the transcendence until we actually integrated, right, what we're including that would then complexify the observer, right? I don't know if we could justify it ahead of time. Like you can't
justify
until
it. Sorry. Please continue.
We would. I think if we're talking about a bottom-up perspective, I think that this is basically. I would say that this is the basic places the two different come from that they're coming from, right? I think Jordan is basically saying, like, look, no, like if you use science to explain all this stuff, you're not accounting for how complex things are, right? That you're basically kind of taking a top-down position, right, and taking everything and organizing it in these very, very simple presuppositions that doesn't include subjectivity, right, and many other things, right? In that actually science is an emergent property, right, from the bottom up, right, and that's the God is what's below us. That no matter how smart that we are, and we try to kind of like, is that what I would imagine that you would say is like overstanding versus understanding. Is that,
except that you have them reversed?
What's that?
Except that you have them reversed.
Well, I am dyslexic.
Well, so I think that you can look at scientism versus religion and create a binary.
Yeah.
And then when you look at it, you say, okay, either one of them is right. Yeah. Or you can turn it into a triad, and you can say, okay, there's this fundamental ground, this chaos, which exists. It's called existence. Right? And in that, there's this, once you get a heroic figure, you create a father, and the father creates some kind of order.
Yeah.
And that in creating order, you differentiate between the ordered and the unordered, the known and the unknown.
Yeah.
So you've got the great father and the great mother.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes the great mother is chaos itself, and sometimes it's really just the unknown, and the hero gets to.
It depends on whether or not you have my mother.
What?
It depends on whether or not you have my mother.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, another place where unfortunately the
A
metaphors break
different
down.
podcast.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So the um, you can say, okay, Jordan is recognizing that the ground out of which science comes
Mm-hmm.
is previous to science, and therefore it's primal. It's
Mm-hmm.
it takes priority.
Mm-hmm.
It's bigger, it's deeper by orders of magnitude, and that's where we should be putting our attention.
Mm-hmm.
That to not put our attention there is to miss something absolutely critically important.
Right.
And I think he's right, and I think, of course, Sam would agree,
Yeah.
because Sam doesn't have a simple view of science.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
Right?
Got
He
you.
doesn't. Sam has an extraordinarily expansive view of science. I think his view of science is very copacetic with Jordan's view.
Oh, okay.
Right? I mean, Sam's book "Waking Up" is about consciousness. What is the ground before the thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not that he doesn't have a conception of that. It's not that he doesn't have a methodology for that. It's not that he hasn't included it in its thing. It's that he uses a different vocabulary.
Yeah.
And that vocabulary, right? So the other, and this is the pre-trans fallacy. You can say the ground is where the real value is. You take the pre-rational and you promote it to trans-rational, and you say it's more important than the rational.
Well, okay, so just really quick. I think I furthered what you said. I was like, well, I don't think that it's like it's. We're saying that the ground is superior, right? I think it's something different. Like, and I think that Jordan's saying the same thing. I'm not saying that he's like saying, look, they're better than us, therefore we should elevate them and follow them. I think what he's saying is, no, like that's what this is what like the cerebral cortex is designed to then look down and then abstract out of that, but not bring it up and like believe fairies and like believe the stories.
What if fairies work?
What's that?
What if fairies work? What if a magical view of existence has you survive for 12 million years?
But like, did we just end up with like new age people that I just don't like? I don't.
This is Jordan's challenge.
Uh-huh.
This is Jordan's challenge. If you're really going to take a Darwinian view, fairies might be the answer.
Right. Okay. Got you. Because it seems that like science, I think science did emerge out of looking down and then abstracting out, then noticing.
When we came to terms with reality,
yes,
we started the scientific methodology.
Right.
We have been refining it ever since. The thing that we currently call science and the scientific method was the latest refinement.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Right, but it's all part of the same movement. As soon as we started measuring the Nile, so that we could predict the floods, so we could plant accordingly. Right. That's and I insist, and this is, you could say a Sam Harris move. I insist that be called science. I insist that the guys who measured the Nile so they could predict the floods and organize society around the planting to create the maximum amount of food to create so that society could grow and become one of the dominant civilizations for thousands of years.
Hang on a second. How does it grow? I don't know about grow. Their whole thing was about staying exactly the same. Like,
no, they might have said that story, but they grew and they dominated for thousands of years. They took over everything. They were an empire.
Right.
They might have told the story, we're just trying to keep everything the same, but they used that story in order to grow like no other civilization in history had done before them.
Yeah. My understanding is that they actually kept they grew like this. They occupied more, but like they like change or growth in our sense of the word of change or growth, right? Improvement, I think would have been very threatening to them. So I think that they measured those things in order to not like progress, right? Which is a radically new notion.
It doesn't matter if they wanted to progress; they did. This is the Darwinian paradigm that Jordan is saying. You can't have it both ways.
Uh-huh.
The story has you adapt to your environment.
Talking about
you become more
Guy
powerful.
Guy Winian, I think is what we're referring to now.
What?
I forgot about Jordan. I think we started to talk about Guy
Winian. Yes. I apologize. Yes. So I'll agree with you. But you could say that this is Jordan's central point: is that the story that we tell ourselves may not match reality. Right? It may not match reality. It might be that we tell ourselves a story of what we want is absolute stability.
Yeah.
But what we create is absolute hell.
Yeah.
This is the totalitarian thing. It might be that the Egyptians were saying we just want to keep things the same. And over the course of thousands of years, they came to dominate more and more people and build buildings that were higher and higher. For somebody who didn't want growth, they sure did build the tallest buildings in the world.
Totally. Now, just really quick, I'm not. Tell me if I'm reading this correctly. I don't think he's saying. I think he's saying that basically why totalitarianism doesn't work is because it's like. Is that when you have the state take over all of our presuppositions, that there's no way that a conceptual framework, right, it can't include like all the paradox I guess it includes paradox, but like all the complexity that life is, right? Or deal with the anomalies. How it deals with the anomalies is not by like going, boom, anomaly. Well, we better adjust our framework. No, as anomalies come up, it just like intensifies the framework. It becomes really fixed, therefore really brittle ultimately, right?
Mm-hmm.
I lost, I think, the thread that I was like kind of coming back on. Like, is that, am I correct?
Yeah. So to continue your thought, the totalitarian regime tries to do what Egypt did.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the answer. Everybody just play your part in our damn answer.
Oh, I don't think that's what Egypt did though. They weren't totalitarians, right? Yeah, like no. That's, I think, what Jordan would say is that they're not totalitarians. That they use stories and they use mythology, right? But they're not using it, right? It's like the world that they're living in, right? That organizes everything that they're doing. It's not totalitarian. They didn't come up with a bunch of ideas and then apply them, right?
When you say that growth would be anathema to them,
I would say change.
Yeah, growth, change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I believe that is Jordan's critique of ideology and totalitarianism. That we believe that we've got the answer, and if you have a different answer, that you should be sacrificed. You're dangerous to the stability that we have. This is the great father gone bad, which is why they have the myths.
Yeah.
Right. They have the myths of the great father gone bad because order can become too stifling. And ideally, you create a system where the mythology calls that into question, and you have a way of stopping the rulers from doing that.
Yeah.
And that happens every once in a while.
Yeah.
That does happen every once in a while. And you certainly go through the rituals so that people believe it, but then the people in power create pyramids.
Didn't like
create pyramids.
In fact, there was one king. Wasn't there one time that there was one king that came in and it changed everything for while his kingship, and then he died and it went back, right? Wasn't there something like that?
So if we had accurate histories, I'm sure we would find that all of the time, because people don't just play their role, and the more powerful they are, the less they just play their role.
Mm-hmm.
But in his story, the hero is the one who challenges the great father and extends into the great mother.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Right? Totalitarian regimes have to kill the heroes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because the heroes threaten to disrupt and to the degree that science does that. It's great, but science is the one system we've ever created that examines the paradigm. It says, yes, we've got paradigms and science moves along paradigmatically, but our whole game is we're willing to question the paradigm. We want to change the paradigm. We as part of our ethic, question the paradigm. Data wins. What culture does that? Well, so cultures can adapt through oral traditions, and whoever wants to tell the better story can control groups of people. It might lead to success. It might lead to failure.
Totally. This may be a different podcast, but also I keep thinking also of like Walter Ong's work about also where oral culture goes to literacy, and like how literacy fundamentally, I think, literacy had a dramatic impact on all this, right? Because oral, like the oral mind and the literate mind are real different, very, very, very different, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, this is Luther.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church had the Bible.
Yeah.
But they didn't take it seriously.
What did they take seriously?
The beliefs they built around it, by which they gained power and expanded their power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Luther came in and says, hey, actually, when you read the book, we shouldn't be doing this shit.
Right.
Gutenberg came out with the press. They started printing the Bibles.
Yeah.
They printed it in common tongue. You didn't have to learn language. You didn't have to learn Latin to use it. All of a sudden, people are actually reading the book, and they're going, hey, wait a minute. The difference between the oral tradition, the Catholic Church, which was an oral tradition, and this literate tradition, there's a gap here.
Yeah.
And so we're going to use the literacy to undermine the oral tradition.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Now, you might say that this is Jordan Peterson's complaint about science and complaint about Sam Harris. That's like, no, we need to have the oral tradition. We got to have stories. We have to have stories with meaning, and we have to be able to have a story that deals with the great father and the great mother and the hero and chaos. We have to have those stories, and the literate stories that you're telling, Sam, don't have those, and therefore they're inadequate. Right? Just like the Catholic Church could develop and grow from a purely Darwinian standpoint. They could say whatever the frick they wanted to say, because who's going to test them? They are the church. They're like ex cathedra. I sit in the chair and I pronounce how it is. I pronounce the truth. You can't check me against a book. I am the source of truth.
Right.
I tell the story.
Right.
And then Luther came along and said, no, not really. I mean, let's be logically consistent here.
Yeah.
Right? And destroyed the church.
Sounds a lot like, I haven't thought much about Luther or know much about that, but that sounds like the lead into like a lot of, like, I'm thinking about Ayn Rand and like your work, and at least is that like kind of almost early set the precedents for early what would later become like Ayn Rand, or is that like just a whole other world like that we don't want to open up right now?
So earlier you asked, Jordan says that there was an axiomatic problem.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, what is truth?
Yeah.
Right. An axiom, I like Ayn Rand's definition of an axiom. An axiom is something that you have to presuppose in order to deny it.
Right.
An axiom is something that is presupposed in what you're saying. You cannot not presuppose it. That's axiomatic. Right. And the question is, what is truth? Right. Truth is this word that is the bedrock. This is the highest. This is the unquestionable. If it's true, period. Now, we really only get that in the scientific paradigm. Right. But we have the intuition that there is something which is true. How do you define that word? That word is the axiom. In Ayn Rand's work, right, you've got the 5 levels: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics. Right, this is the Greek quintessential thing. Right, you've got reality. What is,
how you order them?
Yeah. You've got reality, like what is metaphysics? What's true? Then you've got epistemology. What's accurate? How do we know? How do we think? Who are we that we think that we can understand reality? How do we identify the identity of reality?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then you've got ethics, which is based on our knowledge of reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what's good? I don't know. Let's look. And this is Sam's great thing. He's like, look, let's use reason to understand reality.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And so we can derive ethics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. But all of that's based on what reality is.
Right. Right.
Right. And ethics, you could divide into like what's good for the individual, what's good for groups, and what is the ultimate good? What is the beauty towards which we're moving? What is the possibility towards which we're moving toward in realization? And what can we realize what's possible?
Right.
So, but all of this is based on reality. It's all based on truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Jordan says, I'm going to change the definition of truth, or I'm going to say that I'm using a particular definition of truth,
then you have to rechain everything back up according.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. He's challenging the fundamental axiom of what is true.
And is what I'm hearing you saying is that like, that's where Jordan actually isn't realizing it, is that like, he's saying that he's changing the definition of truth and he's bringing it to the bottom. But in reality, what he's doing is he doesn't notice that he's actually using the same truth as, like, he presupposes the same reality,
mm-hmm.
but he's saying that he's putting a different reality in there.
Yeah. So this is where Jordan is right and Sam is wrong to the degree that we simplify their positions. Mm-hmm. Right. So in my work, right, I talk about wholesomeness, which is that there's reality, reason, responsibility, respect.
Whole with a W, right?
Yes. Whole, like wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
Except when you take these 5 things and you sum them to the whole, they become wholesome. So it's WHOLE,
right.
SUM.
Yes.
Which says that you must define these all in terms of one another. You can't talk about realization without talking about reality. You cannot talk about reality really without talking about realization. And this is Jordan's insight, right? That really, if you really want to deal with truth, you have to deal with truth in the human context.
Right. Yes. And this,
you cannot separate out and just say,
right,
H2O is true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that denies the whole context. And I think he's fundamentally right about that.
Yeah.
Right. But okay, so now we're going to create 2 terms. There's true in the sense of H2O, and then there's true in the sense of wholesomeness, right? Which is kind of the way I do it in my work, is like, it's all about wholesomeness. Right. Yes, we want to deal with reality, but we want to deal with reality in the context of what's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, we want to deal with reality, but part of reality is how do we treat other people and how do we organize our societies? Yeah. How do we recognize the individual rights of other people?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. Yes, we want to talk about reality, but it's reality in service of us becoming something beautiful.
Yeah.
The example I often use in my seminars is look around the room that you're in, right, and notice what you notice, and then be an interior decorator and look around the room.
Yeah, totally.
And you notice different things.
Totally.
Be a fire marshal and look around the room. You notice different things.
And
be an architect.
Yeah, totally. And in my work, if I were to bring this home, it'd be like, it's like if, I think in one of the things in terms of like when you're circling somebody in a certain way, we want to get at, like, you said it's the practice of being with what is. Well, what is? How do we know where to look? And one of the biggest problems with circling is new circlers and old circlers, right? Is the difficulty that they have is that they launch into trying to get the other person without getting where, like, what happened. Like when they're talking about something that's going on with them, either like they don't include what's happening or what happened. They're like, well, wait a minute. Okay, so I get that, like, you have this belief about this, but like, what happened? Like, okay, on Tuesday you went here, and then once you do that, then everything else grounds out, right? Like if there's like, then is kind of starts to really, really form itself. If you miss that fundamental thing about what happened, what were the
that's bottom up, that's understanding versus overstanding, which is I've got a vision of how I think things should be, and then I try to retrofit reality into it. I've got a story of here's what happened, And now when I tell you about what happened, I only tell you the parts that fit my story. I don't actually look at what actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And Sam Harris is saying, start with what actually happened.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peterson is going, that doesn't take into account the fact that what actually happened is a function of the story you're telling. And you can't deny.
Like where I put my attention on to look for what happened is prior to.
Yeah, I mean, what you notice in the room is a function of whether or not you think you're an interior decorator or an architect.
But that shows what you're talking about, like that one affects the other and affects the other, and that's where you're saying that actually, like Jordan Peterson is on a certain scale. What I mean is it a matter of scale? He's correct. He's more correct than Sam is.
So I don't know, and I don't think so.
Right.
But given the way they were using the terms, they couldn't move forward the conversation because they were both using the same term to describe both of those things.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. The truth is, if I say interior decorator and you look around your room, you're going to notice the furnishings from a particular perspective. And you're going to notice those particular furnishings. If I tell you as a fire marshal to look around the room, right, you're going to see the furnishings from a completely different perspective. You're going to notice different things about it. Right. So absolutely. Like what is reality is a function of how you're looking at it. But that doesn't mean that you can't define that.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you can't say, okay, we're going to look as an interior decorator, and then systematically we're going to look as a fire marshal, and then we're systematically going to look at this, and then we can build up a scientific understanding from all of those perspectives and integrate them together using logic and rationality.
And find the commonality between all those perspectives. We go,
yes,
this is the thing that's okay.
Yes. And I have not heard Jordan say how you do that. No one has challenged him. His lectures have not gone into the level of depth. Where how do you integrate these various stories, and which ones do you privilege?
Okay, if we were to take Jordan, right, from what we understand about Jordan, and we were to have him do that, how do you think he would define it or say it?
Well, so here's the thing, and this is my challenge.
It took all this time to get to the thing. Okay, go ahead.
I said this earlier. He has to not go, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. When he gets asked that question, he's like, oh, I don't know. I mean, let's look at it, but I don't know. What does that mean? Okay, so if you're saying let's look at it, then let's look at it. Right? But are you going to use the fundamental scientific perspective to look at it? That's what you do. You basically go through and you study all of these cultures and you read all of these texts and you look to understand them, and you're using this incredible abstraction machine called your mind and making this and the fundamental story you're using, like your interior decorator versus fire marshal versus architect, right? The fundamental story is, how do human beings survive? How do we stop totalitarianism? How do human beings actually live good lives in the face of being in a freaking crazy world? Right? That's the fundamental story that he looks at it from. And I think it's a beautiful story. I think he and Sam have a lot of overlap in that story. I think that's why Jordan went into the conversation with such high hopes that he didn't even think he needed to call out. Like, he thought they could just, oh yeah, like Sam. This is somebody I can have a real conversation with. Right. But then he didn't give Sam enough radical warning. And so Sam never came out of his perspective. He kept saying, look, you have to agree to this. You must do this. You can't possibly mean this. Right. And if they can get past that, I agree that Jordan and Sam have a tremendous amount of, they're coming from fundamentally the same goal, the same lory. Yeah. Right. It's just that the methodology is that Sam says, okay, let's look at reason. Let's look at reality unapologetically. Let's use reason wherever it leads. Let's take responsibility. Let's demonstrate respect in service of realization. You got to do that. And Jordan is going, well, it's not that simple. No, that's not an answer. It's, yes, that's right for this, and this reasons. I want to propose an alternative thing, which is specific like this. And Jordan in respect for the intuition, in respect for the fact that we're dealing with chaos and the hero is making sense out of, right, going into the unknown in order to create order. There's a humility involved with that, but I think it completely undermines his perspective because he's not humble. He's not humble at all, and nor should he be. He's synthesized an extraordinary amount of information into something that's really useful and elucidates reality. It illuminates my experience of my life. He shouldn't be humble.
I got this.
He's got to claim that more.
I got this sense that, like, I got this sense from, you didn't say this explicitly, but I don't think, but I got this sense from from different things that he said, was that, like, that he's already gone down the route and questioned himself in the way that Sam Harris has questioned himself. That it still didn't, like, his view still held up in that, and that he's been debated about this like tons of times, right? Like,
I think that he thinks that.
Yeah,
I think that he thinks that.
Totally.
I think that he thinks that.
He hasn't really done that.
I don't think he's been challenged in the way that he needs to be challenged.
Yeah, I can get it.
He's too smart.
Yeah.
He can bring in more and more. I mean, the thing I love about it is, like, no matter what you say to him, he goes, okay, I've got 15 minutes to tell a story so that I can make a point, because the point only makes sense in terms of this story. And he has an infinite amount of stories. And all of them are fascinating, but it makes it very difficult to pin him down.
Yeah.
It makes it extraordinarily difficult to pin him down. And so I don't think he's been challenged in the way that he needs to be challenged.
Yeah, gotcha.
I think Sam has the capability of doing that.
Gotcha.
But Sam has to enter his world. And that's really tough for Sam, because Sam understands the importance of using, look, we need to have a fundamental framework in which we build agreement.
Yeah.
And if you're going to use this fundamental framework, you can't abandon it when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you cannot do that. You must presuppose this. You can't do that. You can't be serious about this. It's not that I'm misunderstanding. It's not that I disagree with you. There must be a misunderstanding here. You must be misunderstanding this, because there's no way you could say what you're saying if you really understood it. And you seem really smart. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to offer another example, and I'm going to do this. And Jordan says, yeah, I mean, but Sam says, you can't possibly mean this. And he's all, I'm telling you, that's exactly what I mean.
Right. I'm wondering where he's at right now. Cause it's like, he's had most, it sounds like he's been like his audience demanded more than any other person that they talk. Right. And it sounds like people that he deeply respects saying that, listen to Jordan here. Like, he's saying something other than that. Right. So I'm just kind of wondering where he's at in terms of, like, how that went and stuff.
Well, I think he feels elitely superior. And if we want to watch his apology, and I'll tell you why I think that, that might be useful.
Yeah, let's watch the apology. I'm going to put it on pause to get that set up, okay?
Okay.
Recording. Okay, so this, we're going to just go ahead and watch the recording that Jordan made after, and we'll watch it, and we'll just let me know if you want to pause. I'll pause.
Can we pause it, and I'll be my smart ass self?
Yes. Tell me when to pause it, okay?
Sure.
Okay. Here we go.
Dear Dr. Harris, please forgive me, and this goes for whatever audience this video might attract, for reading this, but I need to make this quick and coherent, and this is the fastest way of doing so. I wanted to address some of the issues that I believe made our discussion both more trying and less valuable than it might have been. a problem that many of the people who now listen to it rightly identify. I think that our discussion would perhaps have been more productive if we started from the realization that we're both trying to address the same problem. What is the relationship between science and ethics? You see ethics as nested inside scientific realism. Now, obviously, that's a contentious claim, which is not the same as it being wrong. But the fact that it's contentious, read David Hume and his problem with deriving not from an is, means that there is a real problem there. I see scientific realism is nested inside Darwin.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is a real problem there. Mm-hmm. You're not taking into account David Hume. You're not taking into account the critical literature, which challenges this basic idea that science can lead to that is can lead to an ought.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you squeeze is enough, you can squeeze an ought out of it. That's all, like most people's, way most people live.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. And this is where I think Jordan, unfortunately, exposes his arrogance. And it's very subtle. And again, I mean, the guy's such an amazing guy. To critique him for this it only makes sense in the context that we're doing it in. Totally.
And I think what he's, my understanding, tell me if you agree, he's mm-hmm. not saying that that there is a problem to be worked out. That's what he means by problem, right? That there are things that don't totally connect, and they connect in different ways for different people, and you can see them differently, but there's a problem to be addressed here.
Yes.
Okay.
And the problem to be addressed is Sam's problem.
Okay, cool.
The reason that the conversation did not work mm-hmm. is Sam's problem. Mm-hmm. Because Sam is not recognizing this long-standing ethical question.
Okay, let's see if that comes up.
So I'll say one thing.
Yeah. I bet you
Sam, I can predict Sam. I put some confidence in this prediction that when Jordan says, I think the problem is that we didn't recognize up front that we're both trying to solve the same problem coming from the same basic perspective, which is what is the relationship between science and ethics? And I can just hear Sam pulling his hair out, going, no, that was not the problem. Changing that frame doesn't change anything. The problem was that you're redefining truth. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but Jordan operates from the perspective that the thing that he's seeing is valid and valuable, and the problem was that Sam wasn't seeing it, and so he's going to explain it to Sam.
Okay, cool.
He's not taking responsibility for his part in the conversation.
And maybe that like he maybe because Sam was being Sam in the way that he's Sam, that as you're defining him, that maybe that's actually his complaint about Sam, right? Is that like, I have to say this here because the way that like we were bantering, we really couldn't.
The way that Sam was bantering.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. I mean, let's be clear. This entire open letter is predicated on the fact that Sam didn't get it.
Let's find that out. I don't think I've listened to this whole thing, so I want to get it with you. He did.
Competition, at least potentially, not necessarily. I could be wrong, but I am trying to address the real problem. And I think the fact that you're addressing the science/ethics problem indicates that you see that there's a real problem there too. I also think we only got to the problems with my formulation, not the problems with your solution. For example, the problem with measuring well-being. You consider the enhancement of well-being the proper aim of ethics. However, the psychological measures of well-being currently used are almost only trait extroversion minus trait neuroticism. That's happiness minus sadness. Well, that's how well-being is currently defined.
Pause.
Well, that proposition.
Okay.
Sam would not agree with that definition. And Jordan's read Sam's work, and I don't understand why he said this at all. He's pulling a look. I know the research around this in terms of psychology, and the research says this is what they look at, and therefore I'm going to project this belief onto you, even though you've made it very clear in multiple books that that's exactly not how you're defining well-being.
Well, how does he define well-being?
He actually defines it very similar to me. Take all good things.
Uh-huh.
And the more of them you get, the better it is. More depth, more meaning, more love, more companionship, more wealth, more choice, more creativity, less pain, less suffering, less disrespect, less, right? Sam's definition of well-being is a stand-in. It's just like, okay, take everything good and we're going to call it well-being or flourishing or thriving.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. Okay.
And so again,
so he's
Jordan,
just misrepresenting Sam's definition of
without recognizing that that's what he's doing.
Okay, gotcha.
And being morally righteous in the face of it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
This is Jordan's thing. Now, I mean, we all kind of do that to a degree. But if you want to know, like, if you want to know how he could do it better, don't do that.
Okay, cool. Here you go.
Faulty in every way. It's a big problem. It's a measurement problem. It's a scientific realism problem. You might say, well, we need measures of well-being. And I would say, well, exactly.
Did you say pause?
No, Jordan said, you might say. It's a scientific realism problem. You might say. Sam wouldn't. Right? Yeah. If you're going to call that scientific, yeah, go.
Be nested inside the Darwinian conundrum. How should we act in the world? Here's an answer. Individually, so that the family thrives. At the family level, so that society thrives. At the societal level, so that the ecosystem thrives. And not just today, tomorrow, next week, next year, and across time.
If you could pause
That's the problem, the developmental cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is where he brings in Piaget's idea of equilibrated games, which I was not aware of. Like, I've studied Piaget a fair amount. I can't find where he gets this idea of equilibrated games. But it's beautiful. Like, my definition of thriving is we want prosperity and purpose and pleasure. So we want to wake up to a better world and have a greater sense of meaning and purpose and experience it increasingly joyfully, deeply, profoundly, like, so that it's fun and good and joyous.
Right.
Or equanimous, or like, but goodness, like it feels good, it's meaningful, and we've got more wealth.
Yes.
That's the first part of thriving. And then it's thriving for ourselves and for others and for the environment. Mm-hmm. And it's thriving in the moment and in the short term and in the long term, right? That's how I've been defining thriving for, I don't know, the last, 10 years or whatever. That's been the official definition. And so it's really cool that Jordan says, basically, you've got self-othered environment in the moment, in the short term and in the long term.
Right.
That's really cool. He doesn't have prosperity, pleasure, and purpose, but
he's growing.
Yeah. But that's really cool, and that, I think, fits hand in glove into Sam's work.
Right.
That's why I use Sam's work as the opportunity to teach thriving, because that perspective that Jordan just laid out fits perfectly within Sam's work.
Cool.
But he's pretending like it doesn't. And I don't understand that.
Well, I think because they hadn't, I bet it's because they weren't able to get like far enough in the conversation.
Yeah, except Jordan read his books.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Jordan.
Okay, cool.
Holding you to a higher standard.
I haven't read his books. I've just listened to his podcast and talked to people who are friends of him.
Yeah, sorry.
Cool. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Go, Jordan.
What just Jean Piaget was trying to address when he studied the moral development of children. Piaget was interested in solving the problem of the relationship between science and ethics, and he looked at how ethics in children merged and transformed into adulthood. That's what drove him his entire life. He was trying to formulate a scientific solution to the problem of ethics, and I've drawn a lot of my thinking from that. Now, I'm going to.
By the way, I can let you guys know the source of the book that I think he's talking about, but I have a book that kind of goes into the life of Piaget, and it's really true. Like he was intensely trying to solve that problem,
and did mind-boggling great work.
Yes, I've heard. I don't know enough about this, but I've heard that some of the philosophical and systematic ways of looking at evolution and how that works is just mind-boggling. But I've also heard people say that he's not really a very good scientist. Do you know much about that?
So in the same
way,
great
philosopher, but in terms of experiments
in the same way that I would say that Jung is not a very good philosopher, and Jordan is not a very good philosopher. Mm-hmm. Meaning that trying to cover so much territory and not willing to really stop and define their terms to a degree because there's so much to say.
Yeah,
so I think Piaget was sloppy in the way that. Anyway.
Okay, so that one right there, I want to pause on that one. Okay, so all right, so Piaget's doing did really good work. Jordan's doing really good work. And they're inclined to look at very, very big scopes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, they're not defining their terms because there's so much to talk about. There's so much to include, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that it's both good, but it's both of their works are good, and they're not good when you bring them down into and you demand definitions of them, right? In certain contexts, they kind of fall apart, or they have to tell more stories or something like that.
Yeah, they have to really generalize and go into narrative.
Yeah.
In ways that make them very difficult to interpret scientifically.
Yeah. Okay. And again, that's kind of what he. Okay, we're gonna be ahead of like a dead horse there. Let's go ahead and keep listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Cool.
To a level of analysis, and when I do so, it will make many think I've gone off the rails of this argument. I ask for your indulgence while I try to put things together that have not yet been put together. This means that I have to present many ideas simultaneously, as if looking at a picture, or as if describing a picture, which is how these ideas have frequently been represented. The individual who acts in this equilibrated manner is the mythological hero. It's the mythological hero who confronts the attention, the unknown, with attention and intent to communicate. It's the archetypal hero who obtains the gold from the eternal dragon, the dragon of chaos. That's an evolved representation of the predatory but promising domain beyond the safety of the tree or the campfire.
Is that now right there? Isn't that basically science? That description of the hero on a certain level, it's isn't that kind of science?
So I would think so. Sam would think so.
Okay,
but it's bigger than that. But I think science is the refinement of that down into a method that can be clearly defined and transferred between people and around which you can build societies.
Right. Got you. Okay. There you go.
It's the archetypal hero who distributes the gold that he obtains from the dragon to the community. It's him who rescues the youthful virgin from the predatory reptile. That's St. George. It's the oldest story we know. It's in the Enuma Elish, the Mesopotamian creation myth, upon which the opening lines of Genesis are founded. Can't you see an evolutionary relationship? That's the archetypal hero. That's first a way of behaving. Second, it's a representation of that way of behaving. Third, it's a way of organizing society itself around that action and representation. Fourth, it's that society that then selects through masculine competition for the best contender to that representation. And finally, it's what is selected for by women who peel off the top of the masculine competition. Women outsource the impossible cognitive task of mate selection to the male dominance hierarchy.
Pause.
A hero emerges.
Mm-hmm.
That only happens in the tribe.
Does it happen?
That only happens in the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
That women select the mate, right? Because once you get power, you can have sheer physical power and you get all the mates you want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the tyrannical hero, right? The hero who's gone bad, who does not share the gold, who slays the dragon, gets the gold, comes back and sets up a kingdom and uses the gold to buy soldiers in order to solidify their dominance in the hierarchy, will get all the women. The women don't make the choice in that sense. They're not selecting for the hero. They select for the hero in the tribe when you've got a really small group and there isn't that kind of level of resources where you can hire and control people. But once you get into the agrarian society, I think his argument breaks down. So I'll just point that out.
Okay. Duly noted.
Is at the top of the competition. He gets all the girls. It's that which is selected for. And human females perform part of the selection process. They're Mother Nature, the selection apparatus, the choosy maters that female chimps are not. The archetypal hero might be regarded as a super meme in Richard Dawkins' terminology. It's been around so long that we have adapted biologically to its existence, just as we have adapted in every way to the presence of the 300 million year old dominance hierarchy.
So would you, what does Sam say? Do you know what Sam says about Dawkins' notion of memes? Does he buy it? Does he alter it? Does he say anything about it?
Well, so Dawkins, okay. So Dawkins' notions of memes is pretty straightforward, which is that catchy things and powerful things replicate. The purpose of science is to differentiate between memes that replicate because they're an evolutionary fit to society, right? Somebody tells a good story and a bunch of people follow you,
right?
Versus what is true understanding of reality such that you can work with it in a way to fulfill your goals and achieve your values in concert with other people in service of beauty. So the mimetic structure is, it's like reason requires a reason to use it. If you take away the reason to use it, rationality is just a methodology. It doesn't have any purpose. Right? Now that it's very difficult to say that because rationality is built on truth. It's built on understanding. And that's a moral perspective. But you can look at memes as the anti-reason. It's just an idea that expands. And I think, and again, to get back to what I was saying earlier, so Jordan is saying that the women select for the hero. And I'm challenging that.
Right.
I'm saying, no, the women select for power, who might be a hero, but who might be a tyrant. And most of the time they select for the great tyrannical father,
right.
Not the hero. And I don't understand how he squares that circle. But that's one of the many questions I'd like to ask him.
I know that like with Jordan, I know that he talks about Dawkins memes and he's like, well, it's kind of like it. But I know that like there's with Jung, it's like Jung would say that like, no, it's not like that memes are passed along he's saying like in art, because oftentimes I've heard that like memes have been cared like is a replacement for the word archetype. And I don't think that, and I think that where Jordan's coming from and where Jung's coming from is like, no, it's not that like people tell stories and then they like based on popularity or coolness or whatever that they get passed along. That like, no, it's a continuation of the abstraction, like abstracting out in actual nature of a biological deep structures, like that go really, really, really deep.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Ethics and values are built into reality.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The is determines the ought.
Yeah, that we have access. We have
exactly. And he's saying that reality is the one that does the choosing. Reality is the selector.
Yeah.
In other words, is
that's a big thing.
The ought. Is creates the ought. That is the argument against Hume, and he makes it. And I don't understand why he doesn't see it.
Okay, say that again. That's a very intense thing you just said, or that.
Yes. Yes. So Jordan is saying that reality itself is the selector. In your language, there is a biological predisposition to certain types of stories, which are built into our biology, and therefore certain types of memes, certain types of stories are more likely to catch in society based on this underlying biological predisposition.
Right.
Okay. Which is saying that our biology determines our values, our ought. You can derive an ought from an is. As Sam would say, there's nothing else you could derive it from.
So I want to look at this. I'm not so sure that biology, right, constitutes is. Biology isn't the substance, right? Like, no, it's the study of life, which has substance, but that doesn't, like, the substance doesn't determine determine the biology. There's a whole other process going on that's a lot more like conceptuality, right, than it is, I think, about like measuring out like substance that exists in space and time in the materialist sense of the word. Like, I think biology isn't necessarily, I don't think you can make that parallel. I don't think.
I don't understand how you can not make that parallel. Could you expand a little bit more? How is biology different than is? Right. So, or rather, so we as humans create a field called biology with a series of abstractions that are intended to describe reality. We're making identifications about the identity of reality, the identity of the human body.
Yeah.
And we call that field biology.
Yeah.
And that field is a series of abstractions, and that field is not is.
Right.
But the thing we're studying, the actual biology is. That's is. The body is.
Except for the cell that we're studying, right, has an aim that's calling it forward that isn't material, right? That's, I think, what actually Jordan is talking about.
How do you mean it's not material? How do you mean that?
Meaning, let's see. Okay, now you're testing my left. Let me see if I can get my two left brain cells to work together.
Exactly.
That there seems like that there's something transcendent already to life that you can't reduce down to material. And that biology is the study of life and the way that life moves and self-organizes and all the different ways that it does. I think that there's something transcendent, so the moment, even in like the most minute little cell, single cell, already was a kind of it. Like what it was already beyond itself, in that it was like it seeked to kind of already be a kind of transcendence that isn't material. And I don't think you can reduce it down to the material. I don't think you can. It doesn't seem like it.
So two thoughts. One, that is a very provocative idea.
Mhm.
Certainly, you could say Ken Wilber talks about an evolutionary imperative,
Mhm.
right? That evolution progresses according to rules, and those rules imply some kind of transcendent structure into which
Mhm.
I all the biologists I know question that. But let's say, like, if you're really going to study evolution, I don't know anybody who studies evolution who. Well, no, that's not true. There's lots of people who study evolution who do that. But when I study their arguments, I become incredibly nonplussed. Just like, oh, come
Not
on,
what?
nonplussed, unimpressed.
Mhm. Okay, got it. Got it.
Um, but I'll ask a different. So I think that's a provocative statement. But here's the thing: let's say that transcendence. Let's say that there's a transcendence that underlies the biology,
Mhm.
or that transcends the biology.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's some transcendent force that causes the cell to become a cell,
Mhm.
and that the cell,
Yeah,
in being a cell, is fulfilling the desires of that transcendence.
and that is. Yeah.
Let's say that. I think
Yeah,
that that's
I
an
think that that
extraordinarily
is. I do
problematic
think you're right.
idea,
That
but
that
let's say that.
process is right,
Yeah, that
but it's not
transcendence is.
material. But it's not material necessarily.
Okay, so now this is where you get really, really interesting sets of recursion,
Okay, cool.
right? The cell proteins
Mhm.
are organized according to a pattern,
Mhm.
right? Now, we can look at that pattern and we can say that that pattern transcends the cell.
Mhm.
But as soon as you do that, you're saying, okay, no, because there's an information involved here
Mhm.
that transcends the actual biology.
Right. Right.
And then there's an information about how the biology works together into an organism. And that information transcends, and that information transcends. You've got an interesting recursion. Either matter is information,
Mhm. Right.
right? The thing that causes matter to be is a set of lawful relationships.
Mhm.
And that set of lawful relationships, you can call that transcendence. You can say that that's not actually matter,
Mhm. Right.
but it still is.
Right. Totally.
And science doesn't limit itself to the biology. Science is about the pattern. Science is about the information. It's about that transcendent
Okay.
realm.
So
It's
what is
not
it
that
about?
science only deals with biology. It's the patterns in biology, the information in biology, the transcendence of biology. That's what science studies.
Okay, now if we just now I want to understand this. So when we say that, like, I'm a realist materialist, material, does that mean that, like, my reality is reality when it's grounded in a material? Is that different? Is that like,
Including the pattern that holds the material together.
now, how the fuck is a pattern material? I don't get that.
Because there is no material without the pattern. It's not that you've got material which is held together by a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a pattern material nexus.
Mm-hmm.
They're not different things. In order for something to be something, it must have a form.
Right.
Right? Existence always exists in a form, so that the pattern is built into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can theoretically separate that and say, okay, so I'm
Right.
going to look at the actual biology of all of the pieces of the cell. I'm going to look at the protein and the mitochondria and the nucleus and the cell wall and all that stuff. And I'm going to look at each one of those pieces outside of the context of the cell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And again, this gets back to you could say Jordan's argument that it's turtles all the way up. Right. It's like if you want to understand what a mitochondria is, you have to understand what a cell is. And if you want to understand what a cell is, you have to understand what an organism is.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. But I don't think that you can separate out the information,
Uh-huh.
which is the form of the thing,
Yeah.
from the thing. Because unless it's got that pattern, it isn't that thing.
Right. Okay. So this is another, like, again, I want to, like, see if I'm understanding it correctly. So you're basically saying that is includes the information, it includes the pattern, and it includes the substance of the material. all of that is, and all of that is a game for science to study.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. And then if it studies those things in a scientific way, it will increasingly look for the evidence, which includes the information, the pattern, and the material of the substance.
Yes, or like Jordan does, he looks at the patterns in the stories. Jung went through various stories, and each of the stories was unique and special. And then he abstracted out a larger pattern, which he called an archetype.
Right, gotcha. Yeah.
Right. Now you can say that that archetype is built into the biology, or that the biology naturally selects for that kind of archetype because there's something about that archetype that serves the biology.
Right.
And I think if you say that, then what you're saying is that it's the is of the biology that selects the ought of the moral pattern, of the moral story, of the archetype.
Yeah. So, in that the nature of this is what you say is like, okay, so like reality has a nature, and one of its natures is it like selects, right? It kind of it transcends itself and selects the best thing.
Well, so and this is the Darwinian move. The Darwinian move says we say that it selects.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't select. It does not select. Reality does not select.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Reality just works according to the principles by which it exists. It doesn't select. We look after the fact and say it's as if it's selected. This is
and then but if we say that it's following the rules that we abstract. No, it's not. What you're saying is not following rules. We look at it and understand it in terms of rules, but like that understanding isn't what's driving the biology. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the biology operates by, we could say, by rules, and we attempt to name those rules. We attempt to abstract them and describe them.
But okay.
But the reason we can do that is because reality itself operates based on principles and rules and mechanics. Because it operates on mechanics, we can figure out principles.
That's not. I don't think what I said. I was saying like, no, that those rules we understand though. We look at reality. We abstract out rules. But the rule, and then we apply it back and understand reality through those abstractions. But that reality, that there are no rules in there that the reality is following.
Correct.
Okay. What is it following then, if it's following anything?
That question is so profound that I don't argue with people if they call it God. Right? Why does the universe exist?
Mm-hmm.
The other fun thing I like to say is that's above my pay grade. Right? And
what do you think Jordan would say? Because I think that what he said, because I've heard him make that same thing about like, no, we abstract these things out and then we act like, it's like no, there are no rules in there, right? We abstract out rules and then apply it in understanding, but they're not like nature isn't following rules. I've heard him say that a bunch of times.
Sure. Yeah, I that sounds to me to be an extraordinarily scientific understanding.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that is a great description of science.
Okay, cool.
Reality is what it is.
Yeah.
We abstract it into principles and rules. And it's fair to say that it operates by rules, just like it's fair to say that over time, reality selects for certain kinds of continuity.
Got it.
But let's not confuse, like nature doesn't operate by rules. Nature does not select.
Okay.
We can understand it as a type of selection.
Okay.
But it ain't selecting.
Yes. Okay, cool. 1, 2, let's say we just have a minute and a half left.
More permanent, more real, even from a strictly realist perspective, than such evanescent phenomena as amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. It's even older than trees. The closer you are to that archetypal hero, the more likely you are, at least as a male, to win the dominance hierarchy contest that makes you attractive to women. If Richard Dawkins, who formulated the idea of the meme, was wise, it would have been Carl Jung. An archetype is the ultimate meme. In my opinion, we need to have a real conversation, not an argument. It's not that I think you're wrong. It's that I think that there's a real problem here, which we both recognize and are both trying to solve. If none of this makes even the least bit of sense, if it doesn't at least pique your curiosity, if you can't see that we're obsessed by the same problem, then we won't be able to talk, and that would be a shame. You're
Pause.
sharp and precise. But I think in patterns.
If you can't see this the way that I'm seeing this, then we're not going to move forward. Right? Now, it's not that I disagree with that. It's that claiming that is a dominance move in the game.
Right.
It's saying, like, if we're going to play a game together, we have to play by these rules. And as I've said, Sam is equally guilty of this. But in both cases, it just stops the conversation and leads to an argument.
Right.
They have to get agreement on what are the rules of the conversation.
Right.
And yes, it is intriguing, I think. I think it is worth exploring. But when you make moves like this, what you do is you piss off the other person instead of inviting them into a conversation. And Jordan doesn't realize that he's doing it. And like, that's my critique of Jordan.
Although I would say that like, I get the sense that if like Sam made another video and said like, no, this is what I think the game is, and this is what I think we should do, and I think this is where we agree and this is where we disagree, and this is why I would have did it up. I think Jordan's open to that.
Totally.
I don't know if Sam's open to that.
I don't know if Sam's open to that either.
Okay, here we go. So we'll just finish this up.
Somebody said listening to us was like the right hemisphere of a single brain talking to the left. That's a good metaphor. There wouldn't be so many people trying to get us to talk if we didn't have something to discuss. The relationship between science and ethics is vitally important. If we had a real conversation and no fault is implied on your part, we might be able to further the solution to the problem. Thanks for listening and watching.
All right. So, would you say that? Would you say that you're having a smile?
Yeah,
you're having an is smile.
Well, because I'm not actively engaging, my body is just like sending me on swimming expeditions and vertigo and stuff like that. One of the nice things about being intellectually engaged is that it structures my experience so that I don't vertigo. But yeah. So that's what that was. I'm just like,
totally. Would you say that science, as we're practicing it now, is it giving us greater ethics in the world?
No.
Like, is it succeeding?
No, it's not.
Now, is that because of science or is that something else? What do you say? Seems like a very good question.
Yeah. I mean, this is, again, chicken and the egg, given the context, science, and this is the Darwinian thing, right? Like, most people can't do science.
Yeah.
The great rationality movement is the clearest example of, right? It's like, even if you know all of the biases, you still do them.
Yeah.
Knowing the biases is not enough. At the end of Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, it's like this is like a fundamental point.
Yeah.
Is that even knowing the biases is not enough. Knowing the biases does not allow you to think clearly.
What does?
It just reduces the chance that you're going to make stupid mistakes.
What does allow us to think clearly in a way while knowing the biases? Or
that's the $64,000 question. You could say that the fundamental idea behind rationality is that we can scientifically discover. We can look and say, here's a bias that human beings make, which is stupid. Like, we see one person, right? And we say, I'd spend $100 to save that person's life.
Yeah.
We see two people and we'd say, I'd spend $110 to save those two people's lives.
Yeah.
I see 10 people and maybe I'd spend $100 or maybe I wouldn't, right? There's a cognitive bias in our brain that it's a mistake. And we know that it's a mistake because of science.
Mm-hmm.
So science is the answer.
But it doesn't get us to act differently.
What?
It doesn't seem to be getting us to act differently, though.
Well, so it does and it doesn't. How many slaves do you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Human history has had slaves since time immemorial.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Right.
never been a there's
I have to beg these days. I have to beg to be a slave.
yeah, but I mean
Mm-hmm.
science,
Mm-hmm.
right, changed the way we thought about human beings in terms of individual rights.
Yeah.
Like we went through and looked at reality, and the more we got reasonable, the more we realized that we had to take choices, which
Yeah.
means that we have to recognize the equal choices of others.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And that ethical, political realization
Yeah.
killed slavery in the Western world.
Yeah.
Well, in the Western world, right?
Yeah.
Only in scientific cultures did we destroy slavery. Right? There's still lots of cultures around that haven't taken on that perspective, and they still do slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They move to the United States and they bring their slaves with them.
Right.
Right? And most people in the United States don't think scientifically.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't
Most people
developed their thinking
it's hard to
the
think
capacity that they can honestly reflect on themselves and question their own thinking, which is very, very difficult. And you could say Jordan says to Sam, look, most people can't do that. To build a society on that is to beg for problems.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You keep giving people more and more power, but they haven't developed the ethics. That's dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you say, yeah, I mean, fundamentally it is.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally it is. We're creating like there's going to be biological warfare where people can create smallpox in their kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? They can take their 3D printers and print out smallpox.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that's a scientific problem, though.
Well,
I don't think.
Okay, pause.
Yeah.
It's not.
No. I think that no. I think it's kind of that's people using science, right? Using the development of science and making really, really poor choices.
And how do you get them not to make poor choices? Right? That's the question. How do you get them not to make poor choices?
And
one way of doing it.
I think what he's saying is that there's something about stories, right, that move people more than science moves people to act. I think it's one of the things that he's saying, trying to reawaken.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. Right? When I work with my clients, I don't just work with them rationally.
Yeah, totally.
I'm looking for where is their story right now and how can I leverage their story to get them to make better choices, which is going to create a whole new set of challenges, and then they'll have to create a new story, and I help them create better stories for their lives.
Which is like, which stories help you make sense of yourself? Rationality. What's the difference between when I make sense?
So here's the thing. What kind of story are you going to tell? Tell rational stories. You can figure out which stories lead to pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. Stop telling those. Right? In my relationship course, I talk about love stories and leave stories. Right? You're in a relationship.
Right.
And the story you tell about the relationship can be something like this. It's just not going to work. I just don't see how it's going to work. I'm just going to have to put up with this shit forever. This person's never going to understand me. That is a leave story. You are telling a story that leads to you leaving.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right? Nothing wrong with that. Maybe you should get the fuck out.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? But be conscious about it. If you want the relationship to work, you need to tell a love story.
Yeah.
You need to tell a story that says things are tough. We had disagreements, but fundamentally we were on the same page. We both decided to step up, take responsibility for ourselves, bring our best self to the relationship, and we resolved our problems and lived deeper, happier lives. Mm-hmm. And we made it work, and making it work was absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. That's a love story, right? I used rationality to determine that. I used reason to look at various stories and figure out which are the stories that actually lead towards more thriving.
So really quick too. I was just thinking about this the other day. Do you have an answer for this or get at this? Okay, tell me about the nature, like how rationality is connected to rational? Like why?
Okay. So rationality, rational, comes from ratio. It's proportion. It's understanding things in terms of other things.
Okay.
Right? So you're dealing with proportion. You're dealing with ratios. Relative importance. 1,000 versus 10. That's a ratio.
Okay, got you.
Right? The 1,000 is 100 times more valuable than the 10. Recognizing that, putting all of the various values in terms of one another allows you to make rational choices. Your ratios.
Totally. That the thing that does that, that knows to do that. What is that? What is that? Like,
yeah. I mean, so
is that like part? Is that part of? Is that innate action and evolution? Is that like?
I'll offer two answers to that. One is that's above my pay grade, but that's never stopped me before. Right? Whatever it is that causes quarks to form into atoms, and atoms into molecules, and molecules into proteins, and proteins into cells, and cells into organisms, and like whatever it was that caused the universe to split into superclusters and galaxies and solar systems, and like whatever it is about the universe that has pattern, that makes it what it is, right? Which some people call that God. The deists call that God, and I can understand that. I mean, I call it divinity. Whatever that is divine. By any other name, that is divine.
Now, is that rational? Or is it?
And that is in our every cell.
Yeah.
And the consciousness that comes into existence in human beings is, it's human beings are how nature becomes conscious of itself, how nature can appreciate itself.
Yeah. Totally.
Something about Dasein, something about human beings, something about consciousness, something about the spirit, soul, self, whatever, how the various ways you can parse consciousness and existence. Right? Something about that cares for beauty.
Yeah.
It wants beauty. It wants thriving. Why? That's beyond my pay grade. But something about that wants that. And human beings have the opportunity to discipline ourselves to create that.
So why is beyond your pay grade? Is what has beyond your pay grade? What has us?
Well, so given that for whatever reason this thing cares about beauty, and I absolutely assert that it cares about beauty. That's what it cares about.
Yeah.
Sam says that. Jordan says that. Right? There are things worse than death.
Yeah.
Right? We care about beauty. We care about lack of suffering, more depth, more meaning, more possibility. Given that, I think everything falls into place. Right? How do you explain that? I don't know. There's something about the universe that does that. There's something about the universe.
Have it, or we have a like an expression of it. It's quite unique.
Yes, precious, unbelievable. This, like in this Darwinian world, we have humanity.
Yeah,
we have art. We have these kinds of conversations.
And that like just like what he talks about is like, so even like speaking, was he saying like that we adapt, like there's an adaptation, and then that adaptation makes more possible than what the reason why it adapted. Like, so for example, speech is a function of like, we were able to speak because of our tongue, but we don't have a tongue so that we can speak. It created an affordance that then created other possibilities to run. Now that's what's interesting. It's like that's what's interesting about like, Still though, why did we create those affordances, right? Like, even though you could say that we evolved to grow a tongue for other reasons other than speaking.
Why do we grow a tongue?
Yeah, totally.
Why is the universe creative?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it exist versus non-existence?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's, again, it's
If we
just
could answer
beyond my
that,
pay
is
grade.
that irrational? Like, is that beyond the scope of rationality? And does rationality say that it can't answer that question based on what rationality is? Or
Well, so there might be people who claim to be rational who claim to be able to answer that question. Typically, they revert to some kind of
right.
God, and then they make a story and they declare that it's true in the scientific sense.
Yeah.
Not in Jordan's sense. In the scientific sense, they say that it's true. But no, we don't fucking know. We just have no clue. It's beyond our pay grade. We don't know why existence exists. We don't know why it has a pattern. We don't know why it's created.
Is that rational, though?
Notice how it works and work with it.
Is that just by the laws of rationality, like as we understand it? Is it that we can't?
I mean, theoretically, we might figure it out.
Rational? I'm not sure. I don't have a.
So theoretically, we might figure it out. But we have, right, there are limitations in place which lead me to believe that we'll never figure it out. And one of the most important is the speed of light.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes it's called the light cone.
Right.
If we can move at the speed of light, we still can't get to the whole universe. There are things that are farther away that give us infinity. We'll never get there.
Yeah.
Because they're moving away faster than we can travel.
We can't ever get. Yeah, we can't get to the back.
Right.
Yeah.
We're only going to get so far. There's only so much that humanity can until and unless we break that.
Mm-hmm.
If we ever learn how to break the speed of light such that we can travel to anywhere in the universe, then theoretically we can get enough information to figure out the pattern.
Yeah.
Can we ever rationally figure it out? I don't know. I don't know. I think we can figure it out to such a degree that we would consider it an answer, even though we can never quite understand why there's something rather than nothing.
Yeah, got it.
Right? Ken Wilber calls that the oops hypothesis.
The oops?
And he challenges it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he says, like, why is there something rather than nothing? Oops, it happened. Yeah, and that's the best answer we got. Right? And you can't, and I don't believe that you can succeed by saying, well, God explains it. Because then where did God come from?
Mm-hmm.
All you do is move the level one level back. The question is, why does God exist versus not exist? Why does the universe exist versus not existing?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know that. Theoretically, we might be able to figure it out, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
I mean, I think we certainly don't have any clue at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can't catch the horizon.
We're going to need a lot more science to figure it out.
We're going to have to run a lot faster to catch the horizon, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we got to break the speed of light if we actually want to explore the universe.
Right, totally.
How are we going to do that? I don't know.
What will the universe look like at speed of light?
Some kind of limit. Have you ever read Greg Egan?
No.
Schild's Ladder. Trippy exploration.
Summarize it.
Yeah, Schild, Schild. Schild's
Can you
Ladder.
summarize what he says?
Gregory Egan. Oh no, I can't.
Okay, got it.
He basically just goes into orders of magnitude travel.
Wow, that sounds cool.
So you're going into different universes, and then different universes of different universes, and
wow.
Yeah, and going into time, different levels of time. So are you in the year frame, or the millennium frame, or the eon frame, or the
I mean, that's another thing that it's fascinating to me. It's like, okay, so there's this quantum mechanics level that like work at that level, but then as you go up, it's not like the best tool to explain stuff that like right here, right?
Yeah, atomic, subatomic, quantum. Yeah, at each level, at each order of magnitude. The scale, and this Tarthan Tolku, right? At which level?
Scale.
At which level?
Like identity is more about scale than it is about like in perspective, right? Than it is about substance. But one thing I've been thinking about lately. Okay, it's like how do you account for the transition? Okay, so as I move up from the quantum level into the lack of the Newtonian level, how does it transition from one to the other, right? Like, how does it, that part
Yeah, we don't
Like
know.
there's a lot of
we
there's
we
a
still
lot.
we still don't understand how it goes from space-time to the Newtonian level.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We don't understand relativity. I mean, we have a lot of math about it. We have a ton of math about
Hmm.
quantum.
Hmm. Hmm.
What does it mean?
Hmm. Right.
That we don't have
I
much
think
agreement
that
on.
consciousness has to do, at least the consciousness or subjectivity, which is our version of consciousness, has to do with different, like that our nervous system operates at a different rate of change than what we perceive, right? And that difference in rates of change at multiple levels is what constitutes the various people, places, things that we then make.
Tell stories about and make meaningful.
Totally. That's why I think it's like consciousness is like, I don't think you can answer the question, like the problem of consciousness, because it's like, it kind of like already puts consciousness as a kind of substance or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, I think it's a fascinating question in the same way that I find Freudian analysis to be fascinating.
yeah, totally.
I just don't think it's necessarily that useful. So I don't spend a lot of time. All I care about is thriving.
Mm-hmm.
Does this idea cash out to more thriving?
Right.
But the thing that I say is
that's a pragmatic view. That's a pragmatist view, right?
Yes. Although what makes it cash out is reality.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Right? We care about thriving, therefore we care about science, and we want to apply science to the human experience so that we can systematically make it better.
Right.
Just like we
care, therefore science is the best way to go about fulfilling our care. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And care is fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But you can't understand science without care.
And you can't understand care, though. That's what's interesting. You can't. It's hard to account for care.
You can't account for it. You can't say why it's there.
Yeah.
You can describe it in extraordinary detail.
Totally. But it's interesting. I don't know. It's hard to from care to not care about where my care comes from. Like, what's the basis of that care? I mean, there's existentialism right there, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hey, so I think that it's time winding this up.
Cooked.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go sleep for about the rest of the day until tomorrow.
Gorgeous. Thank you.
Absolutely cool.
Right on. So hopefully they get this, and that this furthers the issue, if not for them, for other people.
Amen, brother.
Mwah.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.